his coveralls caught in this one part, and he was a big, strong guy, and he was able to hold himself back, and he just put his arms out against the side of the machine, and this literally ripped pieces from his coveralls all the way down. There was nothing but everything above the waist was completely wrapped around the machine, and he managed to get, and we're talking about those polyester heavy duty coveralls that you pretty much got to use a 12 gauge shotgun to get through them.
Yep.
And he stood there and withstood this thing. It ripped him down to nothing but a t-shirt and a pair of pants. But man, I tell you, that was, if he'd have been any smaller guy, he'd have been wrapped up in that machine. And
wow,
you just the imagination.
Well, God saved him. God protected him. It looks like my time is up here tonight, folks, and I am going to bid a quick farewell. Thank everyone for listening tonight, and God bless you all. It's been a joy being with you tonight, and I hand the show over to the capable hands of Thumper and Deadcat and Hyperdrive. Stay tuned. It's going to be a great show tonight, guys.
Yes, it is. And I see that we do have a guest caller there. I wonder if it's our guest caller.
Good evening and good morning.
This would be, let me introduce you guys. This is our honored guest for the night. This is Frank CHILLE. You guys might recall that he's the guy whose video we did for the last 2 Hyperdrive shows. And he has some very, very interesting information to share with all of us tonight. So
good evening, Frank.
Good evening, Thumper. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you in DC and your audience tonight. And it's always delightful and a joy to share with people that are open-minded and receptive. And there's so many exciting things going on. There really are.
Oh, we're excited tonight. I tell you what, we've got a massive crowd out there. I don't know if you knew or not, but Q has been dropping Q posts tonight. Are you a Q follower, by the way?
I really am not. Believe me, I have a full plate right now, and but I am aware that so much is going on behind the scenes, and I understand you had Dr. Sala on, and he's doing some remarkable research. And I don't know if he had mentioned it to you and your audience, but he's in the just about ready to bring forward another book on the secret space program that's going to validate even more of Bill Tompkins' extraordinary and historic career. He has been able to get releases of information under FOIA. I had mentioned to DC earlier that I have friends that have been trying to get information released for 8, 10, 12, 15 years, and it's still in progress. And Michael Sala gets turnarounds within 6, 8 to 10 weeks. And when I used to talk to Bill Tompkins, I used to say to him, I said, Bill, they must be really green lighting this behind the scenes. And he used to say, well, the Navy has thrown holy water on it. They gave him the green light to talk about anything that he wanted to talk about regarding his experiences. And the only thing that he was told not to be involved in is they told him not to be on the internet. And I said, Bill, if that's the only thing that they've requested you not to do, don't be on the internet. So I would share information with him, either snail mail or I would send information to him on thumb drives, and friends would bring over the thumb drives and share it on laptops with him. Mm-hmm. So, that was the only thing that the Navy did not want him to do. They did not want him to interact on the internet directly. And
I wonder,
that's...
Do you have any idea why that is? Is that was it about security, or was it?
I think it was about security, but he was not held back from discussing anything that he wanted to discuss regarding his experiences. And we would chat for hours and hours, and our discussions would trigger things in him that he wanted to share with listeners. And Dr. Bob Wood, who was his first editor for Selected by Extraterrestrials, mm-hmm. is also working on a second volume of Bill's life and experiences, and he's probably about 50% done right now. And Bob Wood worked for 42 years at the secret think tank at Douglas, and he never knew that there was a more secret think tank that Bill Tompkins was working with until years later. And when he met Bill Tompkins and they started to compare notes to the people that they worked with, it was only then that Dr. Bob Wood knew that Bill was on the up and up, and what he was saying was indeed true, because Bob Wood knew these same individuals. And I don't know if you folks knew this, but Bob Wood was on the UFO panel that was meant to discourage the Condon Commission. It was basically to put down the whole UFO phenomena. And Edward Condon, who was a senator, had tried to get Bob Wood fired because Bob was on the panel of experts and scientists who were evaluating the UFO cases.
Mhm.
And he went to Old Man Douglas and he said, I want you to fire him because we don't think he's a qualified scientist because he's not going along with our program. And Old Man Douglas said no. He said, Dr. Bob Wood is an eminent physicist and scientist, and he did not refuse, he did not take him off the panel, for the Condon panel. It's really amazing. It really is.
Well, when it comes to disclosure, we're really starting to see some significant events. I mean, just in the last couple of days, the U.S. Navy has come out with new procedures for UFO reporting and stuff like that by pilots.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that, do you think that's I mean, because I'm former Navy, flew as a crewman on reconnaissance aircraft in the Navy,
Yes.
and that was back in the early 80s. And when you're flying around up in the air and you see things,
Yes.
and I know, and I have a lot of friends who are pilots, and you can't get them to talk about the stuff, because if they want to keep their ticket, they don't talk about this stuff because they're going to send you for a psychological evaluation.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's true, and I was mentioning this to DC Thumper, that the Air Force has always been set up as the straw man for the UFO phenomena, but the
Mhm.
guiding and directing force behind it has always been the Navy. The Navy is the one that has taken the reins of this, and Tompkins told us stories of how the Navy opened up China Lake in the 40s,
Mhm.
and the research that was coming out of the German operatives during the Second World War with the technology that the Germans had for discs. And these German operatives, there were 33 of them, were rotated back and forth from Europe to North Island in San Diego, and they would be debriefed by an admiral, Rick Obata, and two captains, and Bill Tompkins was there to be able to tune into what they were discussing, and he would come up with designs and diagrams and drawings, and then these would be put into packets that were taken to to universities and to manufacturing and research facilities to try to back engineer this information. And the saucers that the Germans were building were being built in Turkey, so they were never bombed. Okay.
Oh,
those facilities.
I didn't realize that they were building
Yeah.
them in Turkey.
They were building them in Turkey. So the saucers that were being built that the Germans had were being built in Turkey, and they were never bombed. The other facilities, of course, in Germany were, they were just thoroughly destroyed, including Peenemünde. It's just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
But Bill told me that he had taken in 1943 information that the Navy started using at China Lake, where they built an underground facility. So the Navy has been working underground there since the early 40s.
Well, it's funny because, being former Navy, and we have a lot of other folks that are moderators on the channel, and
Yes.
some Air Force guys, some Army guys, a couple of Marines and things. And, there's obvious, some friendly inter-service banter that goes back and forth. It's kind of fun. And,
It is.
you know what the Navy has, Go Navy.
Yes.
And then the Air Force or the Marines is Semper Fi, and
Yes.
the Army is, the Army says hoo ha, and
Yep.
the Marine Corps goes, "Hoorah!"
Yep.
Well, you know what the Air Force says, right?
I don't recall.
Nice putt.
Very good. Very good. Very good.
We have an Air Force alumnus here that takes a little bit of offense at that. He has a,
Sure. Sure.
yeah.
Well, I was telling Thumper, I was telling DC that I have a family member who was involved in some very high tech work for the Navy. I'm sorry, for the Air Force. He was in the Air Force for 20 some years, and he designed closed circuit monitoring systems for missile silos all over the world. And he always knew of my interest in UFOs and in what was going on behind the scenes. And he would always say to me, he said, "They're here. The government knows about it, and don't worry about it." He'd always say that to me. But he would reveal from time to time stories where saucers would come over some of these missile silos, and the lids on the missile silos were something like 10, 15, sometimes 20 tons of reinforced concrete and metal. And he said they would flip the lids off to show that they could do it. And he said a lot of these events occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base.
Right.
And he said they had facilities where the saucers would come over and burn out the electronics purposely to show that they could do that, to neutralize the facilities. And he told me, go ahead.
Well, my understanding is, and you know, they have a real problem with nuclear weapons because of the destructive nature of
Yes.
nuclear weapons on just, for lack of a better way to put it, space-time fabric.
Yep.
And what a nuclear blast actually does to a soul, a consciousness.
Yes.
My understanding is it scrambles it. If there is death, for a conscious being, then even us or any other conscious being, whether it be from this planet or another, a nuclear blast is devastating, and it can end your eternal life.
Yes. Well, you folks may be aware of this. Linda Moulton Howe shared with me. She has some contacts at Sandia Labs, and she said that they were going to be setting off a nuclear device and a test.
Mm-hmm.
And the visitors had asked them, please, not to set off another nuclear device, another test device. And of course, they ignored it. And the day that the event was to occur, a craft landed at ground zero, and about a dozen visitors that looked just like us got out of the craft, and they laid down in a circle, like shoulder to shoulder. Well, you know, not really shoulder to shoulder, but around where the ground zero, the test site where the bomb was to be exploded. They were willing to sacrifice their lives if that was to go off, and they called off the test.
Wow.
And
That's
Linda told me, she said, people, insiders at Sandia Labs told her this directly. They said they were just blown away by it. But I wanted to continue with my story about
Sure.
my uncle. He told me that when he was in Turkey, he was stationed there for about a year, and he said he had his security clearance was quite high. I asked him at one time, a book had come out called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good, and it said that there were 50 levels above top secret. And I said to my Uncle John, I said, Uncle John, have you ever heard anything that there's 50 levels above top secret? He said, well, I'm aware of 35 levels above top secret. But he couldn't validate 50, but he said he was aware of 35. He had access to see satellite photographs of Mount Ararat, and he said he saw Noah's Ark.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Frank, it is as big as a battleship. He said, it's about at the 12,000 foot level. He said, in the wintertime, it's encoded with ice and snow. And he said, in the summertime, it's out in the open. He said, it's in two pieces. And he said, they did measurements of the trees that it was made out of. The trees were more than 2,000 feet long. And there's no trees growing on Earth today that are 2,000 feet long. And he said the Turkish government does not want anyone to go up there. They do not want to validate Judaism or Christianity whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But my uncle said the Ark is there. And he said it is absolutely undeniable. It is huge.
That's incredible, because one of the things that with all of this disclosure is the idea that we are people it's going to be create in people are what are their visitors, what is their relation to God, the whole Christian belief system. A lot of people think that this is going to really upset that, and I tend to believe that we're going to just find out more about our true spirituality and
Yes.
and the true meaning of God and what's been going on, because obviously there are opposing forces at work here on our planet.
Well, Thumper, I told DC that I've had the honor and privilege of meeting individuals that have met the visitors that look just like us, and they claimed that their forefathers were our forefathers, and they said we're part of an expansive, extended cosmic family, and they want to rejoin with us again. And we're going to be sharing some information tonight regarding new technology and things that are going on behind the scenes. And there's a physicist by the name of Jack Sarfati out of San Francisco. He's a graduate of Cornell, same as Dr. Bob Wood. And Dr. Sarfati is part of a team of scientists and physicists that are going to be validating the technology when disclosure comes out. And I've been told by a friend who's also a physicist, he's very close to this inner circle. And Sarfati has been shown it's called memory metal. It looks like aluminum foil that was recovered from Roswell, and you could curl it up in your hand into a ball, and then when you open your hand, it straightens out again. Okay, it cannot be marred, and they call it memory metal. And apparently, our physicists and scientists have been able to back engineer it and see how it was made, but they can't align the molecules. We can't align the molecules as they do. However, Dr. Sarfati, and I got a chance to meet him through this physicist friend of mine, and we're connected on LinkedIn, and he's been sharing information, and he's come up with a series of 16 pages of equations for the next form of propulsion that's faster than light. Now, it's something that we use all the time, and can you imagine what it is that would be faster than light?
Well, from the video that we were watching the other day, that would be thought.
That's right. It's thought propulsion.
Yeah.
He's come up with equations that link metallurgy with awareness and consciousness. And I asked him, I said, Dr. Sarfati, I said, could this be the means that the visitors are using to travel here from vast distances? And he said, yes. And he said, let everybody know. Now, apparently, he's also part of what's going to be revealed with the Bigelow Aerospace. I'm sure you're aware that the government had told Bigelow to build 3 warehouses in Las Vegas. And you can go on Google and you could see the warehouses, the Bigelow Aerospace warehouses have an alien face on the side of the warehouse. Supposedly, those warehouses are stocked with crash retrieval material from all over the planet, including some of the memory metal. And when it's going to be open to the public will be able to go in there and actually see and interact with this stuff, okay? And these warehouses are filled. Sarfati is going to be part of the team that's going to be validating the alien technology and getting people prepared for what's going to be coming out. I had told DC a little bit earlier that there's a commercial running in this area, in the Philadelphia area, that of the new Grumman aircraft. And the commercial shows a hangar with something in the middle of the hangar that's got a tarp over it. It's fully lit, and the camera goes slowly around the device. There's no narration, there's no music. At the end of the commercial, there's a scroll that comes across the bottom that says, wait to see what's next. And the shape underneath that tarp is not the shape of a plane. It's the shape of a saucer.
We tried to find that because we heard you mention that in the video that we were watching, and I was not able to find that.
Did you do a Google search on Grumman Aerospace?
Yes, I did,
and you couldn't find that?
I could not find that.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me see if I can pull that up, and I'll send it to you. But it was shown as a tease here, and I mentioned it to several people in the area, and they said, "Did you see that commercial?" And I said, "Yeah, I certainly saw it." And I said, "Boy, what an incredible tease that is."
Well,
Mhm.
we're seeing a lot of things, little soft disclosure items, just little pieces here and there, because
They're seeding consciousness. What they're
yes, they
doing is
are.
they're seeding consciousness, and they're nudging consciousness and awareness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it really is. If you are at all watching any of this, every now and then you just see something, and you go, "Oh my gosh!"
Yep, that fits.
There
Yep.
it goes.
Did you happen to hear on one of my lectures, I mentioned a fellow by the name of Bruce Pearson. He's a good friend, and he lives in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And he had an engineer friend who worked at Bell Labs up in Homedale, New Jersey. Now, Bell Labs up there, that facility is phenomenal. It's a 2 million square foot facility. I had a chance to visit it and participate in some lectures there. And there were 6,000 engineers there. They have 7 underground waterproof labs, and supposedly a lot of the technology that came out of the Roswell crash was planted there. Like the shape of the Homedale facility for Bell Labs from the air looks like a transistor. It's designed to look like a transistor.
Yeah.
Apparently the transistor came out of there, laser technology came out of there, cell phone came out of there, Velcro came out of there, fiber optics came out of there, and they were all seeded operations that came out of the Roswell event.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce Pearson, when Bell Labs was closing that facility, one of the engineers that he was very, very friendly with said, "Bruce," he said, "I have some of this memory metal." He said, "I want to give it to you." So Bruce went up there, and this engineer gave it to him, and Bruce had probably maybe a dozen sheets of it, and he took it home, and he said, "Frank, I tried to fold it, hitting it with a sledgehammer." He says, "I put it in a vise." He said, "I tried cutting it with a torch." He said, "I could not mar it at all." And he said, "I would crunch it up in my hand, and it felt very, very light. It almost feels like aluminum foil, but it's got like the surface of like stainless steel." And he said, "It would curl up easy in your hand into a ball. You could make it very, very tight in your hand, and then as soon as you open it, it opens up completely without any creasing or any marring." So he told me, he said he played with this so much in his basement, but something told him not to keep it in the house. So he got the idea of putting it under he had a crawl space under his front porch, and one night he put it underneath the porch. Okay, probably maybe a week later, he was invited to a dinner party, him and his wife. So he went, and when he came home from the dinner party, one of his neighbors came over to him and said, "Bruce, when you left with your wife this evening, there was a car parked across the street, and it came over to the front of your house." And he said, "I don't know what they did there, but he said they left." And Bruce got the idea immediately that maybe they extracted the memory metal that had been given to him by that engineer, and he went underneath the crawl space of his porch, and it's indeed true. They had taken it.
It's gone. Yeah.
It's gone. It's gone. But he said, "Frank," he said, "everything you heard about it is true." And he said, "It's light as a feather, and yet it's like incorruptible." And he said, Bell Labs had that. And he said, God knows what else they had. If you remember the book, The Day After Roswell, Colonel Phil Corso talked about he was tasked with the responsibility of taking the material from Roswell and plant it in different industries around the country. And he was told to tell the corporations to patent these items that they back engineer so that there's a backtrack to these specific things. Like Dow Chemical had Pyrex, they were given Pyrex. Bell Labs was given the items that I mentioned to you.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to have a patentable footprint, but everything from 47 to today has basically been kickstarted by the technology that came out of that craft. Now, if you remember, he talks in the book about that the beings inside the craft had headbands on, and there was a control panel where they could put their hands on the control panel. They were basically piloting the craft using thought. And that's what Sarfati has come up with in his 16 pages of equations. I think I've sent them to DC, and you guys could take a look at that stuff. It's absolutely phenomenal. But they use thought to project where they're going to go. Now, Tompkins told me, he said, the 7 Solar Warden groups that they have out in space right now have the ability of going from Earth to the center of our galaxy in 45 minutes. Okay.
That's
And
incredible.
he said that's using anti-gravity. He said the next 3 solar group, group of Solar Warden craft are going to be using faster than light. And he asked me, he said, Frank, what do you think is faster than light? And I said, Bill, there's only one thing faster than light, it's thought. And he said, yep. He said, they're going to use thought propulsion. So what Sarfati is doing is tying exactly into what Bill had told us, that the next grouping of Solar Warden craft are going to be using thought. And you can go to the furthest part of the galaxy as quickly as you think about it. You're there.
That's amazing.
It really is.
When you're talking about memory metal and things like that, I don't know if DC told you or not, but he's a machinist by trade, and that's what he's done all of his life. And,
Yeah, I want some of that to work with.
Yes. Well, I want to tell you, I have a friend in Northern Virginia who worked as a machinist, and he said he worked for a company that were working on top secret projects. And he said they were working with the purest form of pewter he's ever seen. And he said they were working with tolerances like 50 thousandths of an inch. I mean, that's strict tolerances. And
Pretty tight, yeah.
50 thousandths of an inch. And
Yeah,
he said he often wondered, what are these things being used for? And then when the Tompkins story started coming out, he said, Frank, now it makes sense. And when I had done that MUFON lecture outside of Philadelphia, there was an aerospace engineer who came up to me after the program, and he said, I've been working on things that I've been wondering, what the hell does this have to do with anything that's on the Earth? And he said, after hearing about the Rockwell Integrated Space Chart and what Tompkins was working on, he says, now it makes sense. He said, what I'm working on is something that's being utilized off planet.
That is it's absolutely incredible. And you brought up something just now that DC and I were discussing after watching your video. And that is, you mentioned that we're 1,000 years in advance of what people know that we have. And I've been saying that just my basic understanding of how technology works. You just take this is my story of technology and how I experienced it when what I was doing in the Navy. And that is the cameras on our phones.
Yes.
We had a system that was brought out and installed on one of our aircraft, and it was a little box about the size of a little bit larger than a cigarette pack, right? It had a little thing on the end of it about the size of my thumb. That was the lens on this thing. It had a couple of wires coming out of it, and we tied it into our system, and we tied it into some monitors and whatever. And the guys that said that were installing this were from the Warminster Naval Research Facility.
That's a high-end facility.
Oh yeah,
that's high-end.
And
they trained the astronauts there.
Yeah. Well, the guy said that this little thing, this is what we call a CCD camera. And it's what it's the latest version of the technology that we sent to the moon with the astronauts in 1969, and the cameras that they used.
Yes.
And okay, so that was in the early 1980s is when I saw that. Okay, now 1969 is when they went to the moon. So 20 years later, we've got this little thing being introduced in, as kind of a research and R&D project that we were doing. And so that was, I would say about 1984, 83, somewhere in there. And then the next time I see that little CCD camera, they were selling them at egghead computer stores, and you could buy them as a little ball camera to put on your computer in the 2000s.
Yep.
All right. And now you know, almost 20 years later, we have these cute little cell phones with these cameras that are just incredible.
Yep.
So you're going all the way from 1969 when it was a viable technology that they sent to the moon with the astronauts, and now, you know, everybody's got 2 or 3 of them all spread all over their house, and God knows what.
That's right. That's right. You know, Thumper, if I could return quickly to my uncle, he told me that he saw the SR-71 fly as a prototype in 1957.
I don't doubt it.
In 1957.
Mm-hmm. That was the year I was born, so it was an amazing year, the 57 Chevy, you know?
Yep, yep, yep. And you know, the SR-71 was not revealed to the public until what, the late 70s?
Something like that, yeah.
Yep. But it was flying as of 1957.
Yep.
Bill told me that well, when he started talking about his experiences, Colonel Ware called me and let me know. He said, "I have something I want you to share with Bill Tompkins and with Bob Wood and Michael Sala." And that's when he sent me the Rockwell chart. And I told Bill I had gotten this from Colonel Ware. He said, "Frank, are they putting this out now?" And I said, "Colonel Ware wanted me to have it." And he said he wanted you to have it. And he said, "If they're coming out with this now," he said, "we must be so close to disclosure." He said, because he had worked on that. The genesis of that came out when he was working at Douglas Aircraft in the early 50s. And he carried it with him when he went to the other think tanks like Grumman and Northrop. And ultimately, he was at Rockwell. And his original drawing for this was 20 feet wide, 20 feet long by 1 foot wide. And the final one he came up with was 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. And that's what the Rockwell integrated chart is. And when Bob Wood saw this, he said, "Frank, everything on this chart has been accomplished decades ago." He said, "This has all been done." And Bob Wood,
we have that chart that you sent to
yes,
me, a nice high resolution picture of it. I think Thumper's got it ready to come up on screen. If we could put it up there, maybe you could walk us through some of it.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Bill started working on that in 1952 and continued to refine it. And there are tens of thousands of man hours in that. But Bill didn't put that much time into it as we know time to be. He would work at such a feverish pace. And I would ask him, I would say, "Bill, when you work on these projects, how do you see them?" I said, "Do you see them in a holographic type display? Like when he works on the ships that he built, designed that were 17 kilometers long, 15 miles long in length." He said, "Frank," he said, "no." He said, "I see it at a more intense level than holographic." I said, "How do you see it?" He said, "I get a flash of light in my mind." And he says, "Then I see it at the integrated circuit level." I said, "You're seeing it at that level?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "I draw it out just almost immediately." And he said, every one of the think tanks that he worked with, there was always 2 women and 1 man. The 2 women were Nordic women, and the man was there to basically oversee that the 2 women were not harmed in any way. But he said in every think tank, there were always 2 women that worked directly with him. They would inspire him in his work. They would help him with the consciousness of the programs that he was to work with. And he said, it was so much fun working with them. And he said, they were visitors, but he said, they looked just like us. And he said, he had a wonderful time being with them. And he said, it's going to be so much fun when we openly interact with them, because they want to openly interact with us. I want to return one moment to Dr. Sarfati and that group of physicists and scientists that are working on disclosure. I asked this friend of mine, I said, "Who's pushing this behind the scenes?" I said, "Is it the military that's pushing it? Is it industry that's pushing it? Who's pushing it?" And he said, "Frank, let me get back to you in 24 hours. He got back to me. Guess who's pushing this behind the scenes, disclosure?"
Well, I'm going to guess that our visitors are pushing it, because they've got
That's it.
they've got they it's I've followed Corey Good and a lot of his programs on Gaia, and according to what Corey Good is saying, it's because of the the visitors. Um, they have a stake in this.
Yes. It is the visitors that are pushing things behind the scenes. And everything has, well, state of the art in technology now is changing every 30 to 45 days. It's absolutely phenomenal. I was talking to a senior engineer at Cisco Systems, and he was telling me he was on his way to go out to Vegas to do a seminar on quantum entanglement. He said, Frank, we're at the point now where we could create something with advanced physics and mirrored anywhere that we want instantaneously. He said, there's going to be no more cell phones. He said, there's going to be no more cell phone companies. He said, everything's going to be Wi-Fi. And he said, a friend of his who's an engineer at MIT had just gotten a patent for creating nanobots to go into the body to repair broken bones. He said they're working at things on the nano level at MIT, smaller than a cell to go and fight cancer and other diseases. It's like we're at the cusp of Star Trek technology.
And part of the issue that I have with some of this stuff is, the idea of artificial intelligence, the idea of putting intelligent nanobots in our bodies. That kind of disturbs me a little bit. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean,
Thumper, as long as it's not used for nefarious purposes, and if it could be used for the betterment and for the rebalancing of our bodies, I'm not opposed to that. But again, we have to be ethical in all this. Bill Tompkins told me that he had 3 friends who were in Solar Warden. They would come to visit him every 20 years, and he said they would come down here like on vacation, R&R. And he said they never aged because they were using the tablet that had been developed by TRW that rejuvenates you. Within 30 days, it rejuvenates you. And he said the only things that affected it, nullified the effect of it, are alcohol, drugs, and nicotine. Okay. And all 3 of these guys that were lifelong friends of Bill, they would be asked, do you want to return to Earth? And he said, no, we'd like to come here to visit. And they would visit with Bill and spend some time with him and talk about what they're doing upstairs. But he said they always wanted to return to, working out amongst the stars.
It's fascinating because when you get to the idea of being out in the stars and then just the awakening of the mind, that is incredibly
it's limitless.
It is.
It's limitless.
DC and I had a fascinating conversation the other day about what limitless. We've been saying for as long as we've been doing shows together, and that we can accomplish anything if we can imagine it. It can be accomplished.
That's right. That's right. Yes, it's absolutely right.
And so we're very much on board with so much of this stuff, but at the same time, we have to be able to come along not only mentally but spiritually as well.
Yes, our sociological progress has to keep pace with our technological progress. And a lot of the visitors are concerned, I had mentioned this to DC, that they're very concerned about the fundamentalists taking extreme measures when they make themselves known, because they don't want them to think it's the end of things. It's the beginning of things. They don't want them to do harm to themselves. And a lot of the fundamentalists are thinking that to have that kind of disclosure and that kind of awareness has to be negative, and it doesn't have to be negative.
I hope and pray that that is the way it turns out, and I just saw a little piece here the other day. Actually, I was watching it this morning, where they're comparing, let's see, the movie Jupiter Rising and the TV show V, where you had these advanced aliens who were out to harvest from the human population instead of being here to in service to us, not to serve us up. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Well,
like
I've been told that a lot of that has been nullified, and a lot of those activities have been tremendously curtailed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned to DC earlier, it's like we're watching the last dance of the tyrants, and they're running out of music and they're running out of chairs.
Yeah, if you look at the Q post tonight, that was pretty much the topic of discussion on the Q post that came in this evening, and so I find it kind of interesting. We were watching this this kabuki theater dance, whatever, happening in Washington D.C. with
Yes.
all of the crime and despicable activities of these people, and it's been going on for centuries, in one form or another. And as I don't know if because we've been watching both sides. We've been watching that political side, and then DC and I have been watching this side of it that we are discussing here tonight.
Yes.
And as we've gone through this thing, we're seeing the taking down of the deep state, the draining of the swamp, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, this move to advance the technology awareness into the public arena, which at some point, because of the space programs that we have,
Yes.
you have the and I'm going off of what I've learned from Corey Good and watching Cosmic Disclosure
Yes.
for several years now, actually.
Yes.
Prior to this whole Q thing, and you're seeing this progression, and now the idea of disclosure. Now, there's a lot of people who were saying, well, the deep state was going to use an alien invasion type of false flag in order to scare the people, and then they were going to come in and save the day and be the saviors of humanity and all this other stuff, and then bring the hammer down on with all this nefarious stuff that they've had in store for us. And if you go back to some of the Q posts, there's a 16-year plan, 8 years of President Obama, and then 8 years of Hillary, and and by then we would have been the frog in the pan that's been completely cooked. So,
well, what I've been told by people that are meeting with the visitors, they say, be aware of what's happening, but don't let it break your focus from moving forward. Continue to keep your focus on moving forward.
mm-hmm.
Be aware of what's happening, but don't let it distract you, because a lot of this is being set up as distractions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've got that chart up now, and I'm looking at the 2018 to 2023 section of it here. And it looks to me like the plan is to pretty much get us out there mining the asteroids and the moons in the next, I don't know, about the next 10 years.
And that's already being done. Bill had told me that there's corporate interests that are already trading out amongst other planets and amongst other star systems. And he said, people are going to be so blown away when these things are revealed to them that this has been going on for so long. We've been lied to so long. And he said, all that's got to come away. All the lies have to cease. And it's going to be a jump start in consciousness. It's going to be just unreal. Colonel Ware told me, he said he knows of people at the Pentagon who leave the Pentagon and go to lunch meetings on the moon. He said they leave the Pentagon. He said they start traveling west. He said they go through a portal. He said they're at the moon in 5 minutes, land They have lunch there, do whatever they do. They come back the same way.
Now, I have a question for that. Is this the portal that you're talking about? Is this for those who watch TV on a regular basis, who are kept up with some of the better science fiction shows? They fiction, you know, I always thought that they were more documentaries of the future than actual science fiction. But in the case of the portals, are you referring to something like a Stargate?
Yep, something like a Stargate. Bill Tompkins told me the first Stargate that they had found, the first portal they found, was in Northern Virginia. He said once the Navy found that, he said they went all around the planet looking for all the portals, and he said they put together an incredible map of where every portal is all over the planet. And about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, there was a special on the Ancient Astronauts on the History Channel, and it showed the map of the portholes all around the planet. And I couldn't believe they showed the map that Bill had told me about that shows the exact location, and there's dozens of them all around the planet, dozens of portals. He also told me, he said during the Cuba Missile Crisis, he said when the Navy was putting the blockade around Cuba, he said they picked up something in the Bahamas where they picked up the remains of the Atlantean technology that was there. And he said the Navy started mining all that from 63 on. And then he said they went all around the planet on around where all the oceans are, looking for artifacts of the civilizations. And he said the Navy pulled that information up from these ancient civilizations from beneath the waves. And he said it's just phenomenal things that they have. And he said they utilize all this. Mm-hmm. When I was working for GT in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, and I worked for GT, and we had 5 divisions that they made computers for, and we would process the manufacturing and the commissions for the salespeople in these divisions. Mm-hmm. And I had 2 girls working with me, and one girl, her name was Lori, and I would share information with her about the hollow earth, that there's openings on both poles, and that there are civilizations that are being utilized by visitors in certain oceans that are marked off limits that naval boats can't go into. And I shared this information with her for like over probably a 3-month period. Thumper, she came in one day and she said, Frank, you don't know this, but my father's a commander in the Navy. He's a captain of a cruiser. And she said, I asked him about some of the things you were telling me about, that the earth is hollow, that there's people living in the earth, that there's openings at the north and south polar openings, and that there are places that there are visitors living underneath the ocean in areas that are marked that the Navy can't go into with boats, pass over the top of it. And her father said, Lori, I'll only say this to you once. It's true, the earth is hollow. There are beings that live there. There's openings in the north and south polar regions, and there are places that we can't go over with our naval ships. And he says, I never want to talk about this with you again. She came in and she was so blown away. She said, Frank, you had no way of knowing that my father was a career commander in the Navy. And he validated what you just told me, or what you had been telling me.
Go ahead.
We read early on one of our earlier hyperdrive shows, the private diary of Admiral Byrd.
Yep.
That had gone into the opening in the North Pole, and had a story to tell about that, and how he had met the friendly alien, and that he had a nice conversation, and he couldn't put this down on actual official paper or official in our official archives, but he was able to put it down in his diary from memory after he had left the place. It wasn't like they messed with his memory or changed the way that he was thinking, but he was amazed at how he came into the opening there, and it was like it flipped gravity for him, so that he was actually the way we understood it as we were reading it, that he was landing on the underside of the surface of the earth, but it was gravity pulling him toward the actual you know, what we would think would be up was his down. So it was
Yes.
a very interesting read.
Yeah,
Truly it is.
You keep the land closest to you underneath your wheels and your right side up.
That's right.
That's
That's right.
Pretty much makes sense. Yeah, from an aviator's point of view, I guess you'd be absolutely right on that.
If you followed any of the Disclosure Project, you may recognize the name Commander Graham Bethune. And
I've heard the name, yes.
okay, I
heard
happen
the name.
to. He was a close personal friend, and he had flagship status in the Navy, and he would fly admirals and high-ranking individuals on important missions. He told me that he flew George Marshall to 2 crash retrievals. One was in Reykjavik in Iceland, and he said on board that plane was one Army person, which was George Marshall. He said the rest were all Navy admirals, Navy personnel, Navy scientists. He said there were some American scientists and some English scientists. Okay. He said he also flew him to a retrieval in Utah, and he showed me a photograph of the craft that they retrieved in Utah. And he said, I saw the photograph of it. It was 100 feet in diameter. It was like a charcoal color, and it had a slight indentation in maybe the 8 o'clock position of the photograph. And he told me, he said, it was so light that 4 Navy personnel could lift up the craft. And he said he flew Marshall to 2 of these crash retrievals. He said that he had his own sighting in 1952, which is written up in Blue Book. He was flying from Reykjavik to Newfoundland, and he said they saw something on the horizon. He was piloting the plane, and he said he thought it was a fire at sea, that there was a boat that was on fire, a ship that was on fire. And he said they realized it wasn't a ship, and he said it got closer and closer to them. It was a craft that was 300 feet in diameter that kind of paced them. And there were 23 people on board the plane. Every one of them saw it. When they landed, they were all debriefed. They were made to sign statements never to talk about it. Graham ultimately got a copy of the report many, many years later. He told me that he had flown Admiral Byrd, okay? He didn't tell me in what capacity. I talked to Colonel Don Ware after Graham had passed, and he told me, he said, Frank, I was at a conference with Graham in Los Angeles, and he said we were waiting backstage to, for our turn to go on and talk, and Graham told me the story that 2 months after the war ended, World War II, he said that he was asked to fly Admiral Byrd to a secret mission, and the mission was to meet with German engineers in Antarctica that had developed this technology. And on board that flight were Navy personnel, some American scientists, and some British scientists. And he said the meeting with the Germans were to ask them if they would share that technology. They said absolutely not. They said that Graham told Colonel Ware that Admiral Byrd communicated back to the Pentagon that the meeting went very, very badly. He was told to bring Admiral Byrd back to the Pentagon immediately. And out of that meeting came the plans for Operation High Jump, where they were going to go down there and force their hand. Well, as you know, we got our clock cleaned. And there's a Russian documentary on YouTube that I had brought this to Bill Tompkins' attention. He told me the same thing. He said the Germans really devastated us in Operation High Jump. There's a Russian documentary that has footage of the craft that were fighting them, and there's probably maybe several minutes of footage on this Russian documentary. It's all in Russian, and it's got subtitles. And I copied that footage and I shared it with Bill Tompkins, and he said, Frank, they're the craft. They're 600 feet in diameter. They were German craft. And after that, we left them alone. But Graham had flown Admiral Byrd down there for that secret meeting, and he said when they came back to the Pentagon, Byrd debriefed the officials at the Pentagon, and they came up with Operation High Jump in 1947 to try to force their hand. And of course, it didn't force their hand.
Well,
No,
why
it didn't.
why is it that eventually so many people that were involved in that situation, like um, uh, um, Forstall, he was very instrumental in that
Yes.
that, and he was a very good friend of Admiral Byrd's.
Yep.
And he ended up taking a nosedive out of the
Mm.
Bethesda Naval Hospital.
Yeah.
Well, he was thrown out of it. He was
Yeah,
thrown.
yeah.
Absolutely. That was our read on it too, that,
Yep.
it was involuntary defenestration is what we figured.
Yep. Bill Tompkins told me that Admiral Bada was reporting directly to Forrestal. That secret mission of debriefing the German operatives,
Mhm.
that was all directly reported back to Forrestal.
Mm.
So have we made peace with the Germans now? Do you know anything about that?
From what I understand, they are still working with their own agenda. They're out there traveling as well, and we've basically left them alone. But they still have facilities down there, and that's yet to be revealed.
But they're of German descent, but they don't have anything to do with the German country and Angela Merkel and any of that now.
No. But there's a strong German influence in South America,
Right.
and there's Graham Bethune told me. He said in 1945, as the war was ending, he was flying missions over the Caribbean, and he said he saw 6 of the largest U-boats he had ever seen, and he said the water's so clear and it was shallow enough that they could see the German submarines, and he communicated back by radio to the naval facility in Florida, and he said, "Do you want us to bomb them?" And they said, "What direction are they going?" And he said, "They're going south, towards South America." And Graham was told by command to let them go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now with the Navy so involved with all of this advanced technology and everything, the idea that the submarine fleet that we see is a far cry from
What we have.
submarine fleet that we don't see,
That's right.
and
Yes.
their ability to travel like through underground basically tunnels that
Yes.
are very, very deep and huge, cavernous tunnels. They could pretty much go anywhere in the world undetected
Yep.
to what we would describe as our current visible technology. Um, uh, and what kind of information do you have on that? Other anything?
I was told that there are underwater facilities off of the West Coast that you could travel from Long Beach to basically Vegas underwater.
Mm-hmm.
Huge underwater caverns, big enough that submarines could turn around. They don't have to back out. They could turn around.
There's always in my area. I live in the Pacific Northwest, Eastern Washington,
Yes.
and in North Idaho, in the Panhandle up there, there's a very large lake, and they do testing of submarines there, scaled down models.
Yes.
But there's always been an urban legend around here that one of the reasons that and that you're familiar with Admiral Farragut.
Of course.
Well, there's Farragut State Park in North Idaho, and it's on Pend Oreille Lake. It's a very large, very, very deep lake, and there is still a test facility there on the lake, and they drag little scaled down submarines out into the lake and everything. But the facility there is like, I mean, we're talking, the Constantine wire and the barbed wire and the cameras and everything in amongst everybody's cabins on the lake right there in that little bay.
Yes.
Yeah, this is interesting.
And but the urban legend is that I guess my audio was down a little bit. The cat readjusted my soundboard here. Sorry about that, guys. Is that a little bit better?
You sound crystal clear.
Okay.
That's much better.
Yeah, the cat gets up here and sleeps on the desk, and he stretches out, and the slider on the mixer gets adjusted sometimes.
Yep.
Anyway, but there's an urban legend that there is a waterway that goes from Pend Oreille Lake out to the ocean. And
How far inland is that?
You're talking 350, 370 miles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From Puget Sound.
Yeah, it'd basically be from Puget Sound all the way over to northern Idaho.
Thumper, were you aware of the Tompkins story regarding the Naval League training facility outside of Medford, Oregon?
Now, that is something I wasn't aware of until I watched your video.
Okay.
But, we have been also, one of the things that we also talk about on our Hyperdrive show is the mind control technology that they're using, and, Project MK Ultra and all of that. Yeah. And there was also I don't know if this is the same facility, but there was an MK Ultra facility in Oregon as well. Now, are these two the one and the same, or are we talking?
Well, Bill told me, he said there's two branches of the Navy League. One, it's an outstretched program to help families, and he said the other one has to do with extraterrestrials. And he said there's a facility, a farm about 12 miles outside of Medford, and he said members of naval families have their children go out to this farm. They're taken out by bus. And he said the farm, the teachers there are visitors that look like us, and they teach the children using holographic projections for work that they'll be involved in Solar Warden.
That's fascinating. That really is absolutely fascinating.
It's really unbelievable stuff.
Well,
he said, Frank, he said these children are so brilliant, and he said they go right into Solar Warden programs. And he said their parents know that their children are being trained by these visitors, and they're benevolent visitors. They're not negative at all.
So, are these children? They're obviously, as you said, that they're the children of the naval officers. Have they been augmented in some way, or are they just enlightened in such a way that
I believe that the training has helped open up their awareness and consciousness so that it becomes easy for them to accept using parts of their mind that normally we don't utilize. Because when you see a holographic projection like that, there's got to be all kinds of triggers.
Mm-hmm. Now, did William Tompkins ever talk about? Because I firmly believe, and the idea of Dr. Sala talked about time travel.
Yep.
And time is elastic, and it's not necessarily linear. Once a moment's gone, it's gone forever. I think it's basically time is a construct we use in our current reality that we're, this duality reality that we live in.
Yes. And
once you shed that veil of time, it really opens things up. And I don't know if DC told you or not, and I know, because I know you guys had a lot of phone calls and conversations, email and phone calls and stuff. But one of the things I keep telling people is, you hear the phrase, think outside the box. You need to think outside the box. And my whole deal on that is throw the damn box away. Get rid of it. Throw it away.
Sure. Yeah.
Just get rid of it, because there's so many things that we have been programmed to believe, to do, to say, and all of that. You gotta, because I think our visitors understand that. And that's one of the things that they're trying to break through to us. and open up our minds to is the idea that we've been living in this little box that's been defined by those people that want to control us, manipulate us, keep us where we're at. And for us to break out of that, all things, all dogma, all these things, we're going to rewrite it all.
That's right. Yes.
I'm excited about it. It's incredible.
You being in the Navy, Thumper, were you aware of the Navy program that started in 2000? There are meetings that are held in San Diego once a year. It's a 3-day event. And Bill had been invited to the first one up until the last one that he attended in 2017. And they were 3-day events. And he said, your access to the facility is by color code. And he said that it's all Navy personnel and NATO personnel come in from Europe. And he said what they talk about for 3 days is advanced technology, back engineering, ET technology, and interacting with ETs. And he said the Navy has been doing that since the year 2000. And I said, Bill, when you go there, they're aware of you talking about these things. I said, do they see anything for you not to talk about? He said, Frank, they said not one negative thing to me. He said, they recognized me. I didn't recognize them, but they recognized me. One and 2-star admirals, a 4-star admiral came up, put his arm around him and wanted to have a picture taken with him. And he said, nobody said anything negative to me. And he said, they just would tell him, continue talking, continue sharing what you're sharing.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so much information. I've been kind of I'm a science fiction fan. I love the TV series Stargate, which I think again was another soft disclosure. Talking about portholes, stargates, aliens, and then the TV show tied aliens into our history and things. Which brings up a question that a couple of people have asked me to ask you.
Sure.
Valiant Thor.
Yes.
What you got?
It's one of my favorite subjects. When I read the book Stranger at the Pentagon, I never thought I'd ever meet Dr. Frank Stranges myself. And when I was living out in California, had a chance to meet with him on several occasions and talk to him and his wife. And a lot of people think that Valiant Thor had left after him being at the Pentagon for a 3-year period from 57 through 1960. And he's never basically left. Dr. Stranges had told me that there was a 4-pronged program that Valiant Thor was involved in after he left the Pentagon, because the Pentagon, all they wanted to know was the secret of how his craft traveled, how his suit could repel laser beams, how they had no disease or no fatigue, and things that they would utilize for military purposes. And, Val's thought was, you don't give matches to children.
Mm-hmm.
So he did 4 10-year programs. The first 10-year program was to contact world leaders and to let them know that we are part of a cosmic family, that there are visitors here from other planets that want to interact directly with us. And every one of the world leaders said no. They were not interested in coming forward with it. The next 10-year program was to contact heads of religious organizations from all around the world. And the same thing was expressed to them about a willingness to come forward and to admit that there's a greater reality out there. And I asked Dr. Stranges, I said, what happened when Valiant Thor met the Pope? And he said, basically, they said, you row your boat, we'll row ours. So that failed. The third 10-year phase, and this was from 1961 now, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The third phase was to contact heads of universities and colleges all around the planet to let them know about the reality of there being visitors here and that we're part of an expansive cosmic family. That failed. The fourth phase was to contact and interact with people in the grassroots movement to get them aware of what's actually going on out there, and that's what's been going on behind the scenes. And he continues to work with that. Graham Bethune had always loved the idea of Valiant Thor and believed it was true. And he contacted Dr. Stranges and he said, would it be possible for you to ask Valiant Thor if I can get a blueprint of his craft called Victor 1? It's 300 feet in diameter. And Dr. Stranges asked Valiant Thor, and he said, yes, I'll be happy to give you a blueprint of my craft to give to Commander Bethune. But he said, I do not want you to mail it to him. Have him come out to Van Nuys, California. That's where Dr. Stranges lived. So Commander Bethune jumped on a plane, went out there, met with Dr. Stranges, got the blueprint. He came back, he flew back to Philadelphia. He contacted me, he said, Frank, we got to get together for lunch. He said, you have to see this blueprint. We got together for lunch. We had a quiet table where nobody was around, and he opens up this blueprint of Victor 1, and it is an incredible blueprint of the ship. And it was just remarkable that Valiant Thor had given it to Graham Bethune. He wanted him to have it.
That's
And,
amazing.
It really is.
Is there enough data in that blueprint to actually recreate that ship?
Hey, DC, can you check your Zoom chat real quick, please? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm going to have to drop the share in order to do it.
Should we pause?
No, we're good.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Okay.
I don't know if there was enough data to build the ship, but I'm telling you, it had everything there, and it was a cutaway of the ship, and it showed every aspect of the ship. It was magnificent. It was really incredible. And every time I got together with Graham, he would show me different things that Admiral Fournet would give him. Admiral Fournet was in naval intelligence, and he was also in rocket design. And he had shared with Graham footage of the craft, and he would get still photos, and he would show me still photos of the craft that Admiral Fournet had given him. Incredible photographs, I am telling you. He was just really remarkable, and he was able to talk about his own experiences. He had gone through flight school with Gordon Cooper, with John Glenn, with what is it? Gordon? No, not Gordon Cooper. Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
Astronaut Mitchell.
Okay.
But anyway, he said he knew these guys. He said, Frank, every one of them had experiences seeing the craft when they were in orbit or off planet. And he told me that Gordon Cooper told him that he had an experience in Germany when he was training a flight of aviators where saucers would come and kind of pace them. And he was the intel officer at Vandenberg Air Force Base when a craft landed. I think it was in 56 or 57. And he said 100-foot diameter disc came down, and he said beings came out that looked just like us, wearing one-piece suits with long hair and blonde hair and blue eyes. And he said he had taken photographs. He had taken 35 millimeter footage of it, and 60 millimeter footage and 35 millimeter still shots of the craft and the beings. And he said they contacted the Pentagon, and the Pentagon said, have your two lieutenants bring those photographs and that footage back to the Pentagon. And Gordon had to handcuff the suitcases around the wrists of those two lieutenants to take back to the Pentagon. Do you know that he gave a behind the closed doors session to the United Nations talking about the visitors?
I'm not surprised. There's numerous stories.
He was the most vocal. Gordon was the most vocal of all the astronauts.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew Graham very well, and he shared so much with Graham. And he said, Gordon's not afraid. He said, they try to make him look foolish, but he said, what Gordon is talking about is right on. It's true.
Yeah, well, character assassination is one of the best ways that the deep state has of controlling the story, the narrative. Yes,
I would recommend anybody, if they get a chance, go online and take a look at Gordon Cooper's book. And I think it's in the first chapter, the address that he made to the United Nations about the visitors. And it was behind closed doors, and he kept it super secret. But the entire address that he gave the United Nations is in there, and I recommend everybody read it. It's right on.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you look at what we've discovered through just the questions that Q has posed, and we've got over 6,000 people in our server alone, in our Patriot
Wow.
server, that are curious people, and you ask a question and they start digging, and you know, and so much of this stuff, Frank, is hidden in plain sight.
Sure it is. Sure.
But there's so much of it. And then there's opposing views, because obviously those that don't want the word out there, they're putting out a counter narrative. You know, and you know, what was it? William Casey said, by the time we get done with the American people, they won't know what to think. You know.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and he was the director of the CIA until they tossed him out of his little robot out in front of his house in the waterways there around DC. What do they call them? But anyway,
Yep.
yeah, he died mysteriously. Funny how that happens, you know.
Thumper, when I was mentioning to you about Philip Corso and him planning the technology, the seeding technology that had been obtained from Roswell, his son said that when his father passed, he left a stack of documents as tall as the sun is, like 5.5 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And he said in those documents, they talk about time travel, they talk about parallel Earths, and his father said that they saw parallel Earths where in one scenario, Germany won the Second World War and was running the world. They saw another one where the Cold War was won by the Russians. And he said they've been able to visit these parallel Earths that look just like us, that have different scenarios. And he said that he has this information broken up and hidden in different areas. And he said the CIA knows that his father had left all this information to him. They visited him several times. They said, we grant you approval to release this information. However, we do not want you to release any information your father left you about the Kennedy assassination. Everything else is all right. You could go ahead and print it, okay? And yeah, because you know how bad that is. Well, yeah. The son has an aircraft manufacturing company in Florida, and to try to deter him from publishing anything, he would get orders from senators and congressmen for planes, and they would be prepaid in advance, and delivery was never accepted. You know what that was? That was a form of trying to bribe him not to release this. He said, they're paying me for craft I hadn't even built yet, prepaying it, and they didn't want delivery. And his wife and his children were so nervous about all this, but he feels that his father left this information and it should be revealed, and it's going to be absolutely astounding. I happened to mention to DC probably yesterday about Major George Filer, who was an intel officer in the Air Force, and he would brief generals and colonels on a daily basis, and he was a courier between 3- and 4-star generals to Curtis LeMay. I mean, this guy was very, very highly placed. Well, a friend of ours came up to visit us, and he wanted me to take him to visit George at his home in Medford Lakes, New Jersey. And he had a document. I'd never seen this before. I didn't even know that it existed. A document that was presented to the House of Representatives. It had the House seal on it in 1978 that talked about time paradox and alternate Earths.
Mm-hmm.
And he let us see it. And he said the Congress had been briefed on this in 1978 that they know that there's parallel Earths. He wouldn't let us take any photographs of it, but it was an official document. It was mind-blowing. So they know all this, Thumper, in DC. Mm-hmm. They know all this. I was telling DC that George Filer, I'm going to try to coordinate to have him come on your program. He's had so many incredible experiences. He was an intel officer in the Air Force, and he was based in McGuire Air Force Base, where there was an incident in 1978. Thumper didn't know anything about it. I don't know if you know anything about it. But in January of 1978, I believe it was January 17th or 18th, New Jersey state troopers were chasing UFOs that were flying at treetop level through the Jersey pines. And the craft went in the south gate of McGuire Air Force Base, the Pemberton Gate, and the police followed them in. One of the craft came down over the tarmac, and the being came out, and McGuire Air Force Base and Fort Dix are adjacent to one another. The being started walking across the tarmac as if it was going to the Fort Dix facility. And an MP saw the being, freaked out, and shot and killed it. Okay. They brought out a team of Blue Berets from Wright-Patterson. They cordoned off the facility. They surrounded the body. They packed the body in dry ice and flew it back to Wright-Patterson. George Filer was the intel officer there that had to brief the commanding officer the next day. The person who was involved, they sent everybody to like the Four Winds. You know, they basically separated everybody to keep them quiet. But George was aware of it. He was there at the base, and he said they ultimately found the MP, and they did an interview with him. You can go online and check it out yourself. It's called the McGuire UFO Incident.
Yeah, he was probably given a post in Nome, Alaska, or something like that.
Right?
Yeah. After a couple of weeks of intensive chemical therapy.
Yeah. It's absolutely amazing. I had met another fellow who lives in the Scranton area, and he was at a naval facility where there's not supposed to be a naval facility in the National Forest in the center part of Florida. The facility, I'm trying to remember the name of the facility, and he said discs would come out of the lakes there in the Ocala National Forest, and he said one disc would come over the base and dwarf the base. He said it was an orange-colored disc, and he said it would fry all the electronics. And he said, we saw it. And he said, after it would leave the facility, intel people would come in and make them sign statements not to talk about what they saw.
Do they know what the was that an aggressive action, or were they doing something there that our visitors?
They just wanted to show that they could control their operations there and shut it down. And he said every time they burned out the electronics, they had to rebuild everything all over again. He said one time it was over the base, and he said it didn't burn out the electronics. And they said 1 second it was over the base, the next second it was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They said it was traveling at like 25,000 miles an hour. Now, George Filer told me, he said, Air Force tracking facilities have tracked craft in our atmosphere going 100,000 miles an hour.
One of the things I was reading, go ahead, DC.
Absolutely. No, we know that when you pass through the sound barrier using normal propulsion means, you create a sonic wave that follows you. And every time you pass through another iteration of the sound barrier, you also pick up another sound wave behind you.
Yeah.
So 100,000 miles an hour, think of the sonic booms that would just boom, 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 boom like that. I mean, it would shatter windows all over the world if they didn't have some way of circumventing the inertia effect.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Can I ask you folks for me to have a short pause just for a moment?
Absolutely.
Sure.
By all means.
Just give me a short pause. I'll be right back.
I love this. Wow, amazing information here.
And I've got that article, the alien being shot dead by MPs, January 18th, 1978, Fort Dix and McGuire. I've actually got that up in front of me here.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, I just looked that up. He's absolutely right. I mean, it's exactly as he stated it. They were chasing the. Here, I'll read a couple of paragraphs from it. Case basics. This section compiled by Richard Hall. I'm
gonna listen, but I'm gonna step away and refresh my coffee, and I'll be right back.
That's fine. I'm
listening.
just going to go ahead and read this until you get back, and then we can comment on it. During the early morning hours of January 18th, 1978, UFOs were sighted flying over Fort Dix and McGuire Air Force Base, adjacent military bases. Shortly afterward, an Air Force security patrol was ordered to the back gate of McGuire Air Force Base to allow entry to New Jersey State Police, who were searching for something. One of the airmen on duty was Sergeant Jeff Morse. The state trooper told Morse, and this is a pseudonym, they've given him a different name for this. The state trooper told Morse that a Fort Dix MP was pursuing a low-flying object that had hovered
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, I was just reading the article about the alien being shot on January 18th, 1978 at Fort Dix.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, and it's
George Filer could go into more detail about all that with you. He lives in Medford Lakes, about 20 minutes from where I live. And when he and his wife moved into the facility, I told Thumper, I told DC that George has met with the beings, and they look just like us. Okay. The first night that they go ahead.
What we would refer to as Nordics.
Yep. Yep. And the first night that they moved into their facility, it's a beautiful house on a private lake in Medford, New Jersey. He said the first night that they were in there, a craft came out of the lake, parked itself outside of their master bedroom window, and put on a light show inside their master bedroom, welcoming them to Medford Lakes.
Welcome to the neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah.
And I spoke to his wife, Janet, about it. She said it was the most extraordinary thing she ever experienced. And she said she wasn't in fear at all. She said it was just a beautiful, beautiful display that they gave us.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Well, that craft patent that I sent
Yes.
you this evening, it talks about the envelope that is caused, the inertia-free envelope that is caused by the drive system in this vehicle that I had read, that the Navy actually has a patent for, that they've just recently released. Actually, it came out on that article came out on April 18th, which is just a few days ago.
Just a few days ago, yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
So this is being the information is being released to us. But the interesting part about that, in relation to what you just described coming out of the lake, there is that this envelope, this inertia-free envelope that this drive system creates around the vehicle, actually allows it to travel through air, water, any kind of medium that doesn't have actual physical, like I would assume it can't fly through rock or mountains or something like that, but anything that doesn't have obstructions in the way, it seems like it could travel through it without any problem.
Yep. George Filer told me that he's got connections still in the intel industry, and he said one of the researchers at Wright-Patterson had told this friend of George that one of the craft that they have there looks like solid metal. It looks like stainless steel. He said you could go over to it and stick your arm in it, and it's soft and it gives. You take your arm out, and it repairs itself.
That's incredible.
That's really something. It's really something. It's
memorable.
almost like it's organic, that it could grow and expand and contract upon need. Thumper in DC, do you know the story about the hunting lodge in Medford, Oregon, at Bill Tompkins and the county commissioner and several others were invited to?
No, I haven't heard about that one.
Are you ready for this? Are you sitting down?
Well, and to answer one of our chatters out there, yes, we are recording the show tonight, and it will be available for viewing tomorrow as soon as I can get it up. Excellent, excellent.
And we have a couple of questions I've archived for when you're ready to take a question or two from the audience.
Oh yeah, all right. We could start now. I love questions.
Okay, well, the first question, it already scrolled up, but I remember what it was, and that was that David Wilcock had talked about an island that is cloaked.
Yes.
You know anything about that?
Yep, it's off of Ireland. It's off the UK, and they call it. I believe it's not Brazil. It's something similar to that, but it's cloaked and seafaring personnel have seen it upon occasion, like every couple hundred years, and it's not on any map. It's not marked on any map, and apparently it has advanced technology similar to what Atlantis had.
Fascinating.
Are there beings still living on it?
Oh, yes, there are. Yes, yep. From what I understand, there are monks that protect the island. And when time is right and when mankind is ready, it should be revealed. There's also stories about secret archives all around this planet that have the true history of the planet. And Valiant Thor had provided information to George Hunt Williamson. He was a researcher, and he wrote a book called Secret Places of the Lion, Other Tongues, Other Flesh, The Road in the Sky, a whole bunch of great books, Secret of the Andes. And Valiant Thor would bring information from a secret archive, give it to George Hunt Williamson. He would incorporate it into his work, like Secret Places of the Lion, and it talked about the true history and what was going to be given to us with the Egyptian technology, that Egypt was rising up and elevating consciousness, and how it was shut down. It's really phenomenal. But these secret archives have tablets in them that you stand in front of the tablet, maybe 4 feet away from the tablet, 4 or 5 feet away from it, and your energy field creates a trigger, and it creates a holographic representation of a certain part of Earth's history, and you can watch it as if you're actually there.
That is amazing. Hey, one of the really great things about our platform here, Patriot Soapbox, is that, you know, we have this Zoom meeting interface, but we also have this wonderful resource called our live chat on YouTube, because people are watching it out there on YouTube live.
Yes. Yes.
The name of the island that you were grasping for.
Yes.
The collective consciousness that is our live chat. I've had several people. Hi Brazil.
Hi Brazil. That's it. That's it. Hi Brazil.
Hi Brazil. BRASEL.
Yes.
Is the name of that island.
Yeah.
And that courtesy of our live chat. Thank you guys.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Amazing.
Yeah. I believe the history of that dates back thousands of years. Thousands of years.
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you what, Frank, I don't know if do you have the YouTube channel up so you can see the live chat?
No, I don't. I understand DC was telling me it buffers quite a bit, so I didn't even try bringing it up. But any questions that they have, I'll be happy to try to address them to the best of my capability.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what.
Getting very little buffering tonight.
Yeah, we're having an amazing connection tonight. And I'll tell you what, right now.
Holy water's been thrown on it.
You are helping us break hyperdrive records. Right now, according to YouTube, we have over 1,400 people checked in on our live chat right now.
That's wonderful. That's really, really excellent. I'm happy to hear that. I want to share with you and your audience that ever since that MUFON lecture came out, I've been getting emails from all around the world. And one individual contacted me about the work that Bill Tompkins was involved in. Mm-hmm. And he said he was involved in nanotechnology 20 years ago that opened the door to a lot of what Tompkins claims that we've done. He said, we've done it. Mm-hmm. And someone else who is, he works at a veterans hospital, told me that he has to deal with people that were part of Solar Warden that came back here, and they're in hospitals where they tell him stories of what they were involved with off planet. And unfortunately, they're kept in a drug state to try to minimize because some of them, it's hard for them to come back to this reality.
I would imagine when you basically get out there and see the truth and start realizing what is actually happening here, and and that relates back to a Bible story. One of the persons in the Bible. I'm not a fantastic Bible scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but the Lord took him up into heaven, and he didn't want to come back, but he had to come back. Yep. And so that fits, that dovetails to what you're saying about people who have gone out there and have experienced the freedom, the immenseness, and it's not just the technology. And a question that the chat has thrown out here as well is that the visitors do believe in the Creator, and that. What's your knowledge on that?
The ones that I've met that have interacted with beings that look like us tell me that they've been told by the visitors that they never stop walking with the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they said that their forefathers are our forefathers. And when they look down upon us and they see how we treat one another with war and with anger and with envy and deceit, they can't believe it. They said, we're all one family. Can't we understand that we could all benefit and move forward with the benefits of higher awareness and higher consciousness, and not have the need for any of that other nonsense?
All of those controlling things. DC and I had an amazing after our morning show. I think he probably told you we also do a daily morning show called Straight Shooting.
Yep.
But we were talking about money and rights and different things. And when you start looking at the control mechanisms that have been put into place on our planet here, and then as I say, throw the box away. Do they use money? Do the aliens have some kind of means of exchange of value that you're aware of?
We do. Nothing that we do. Everything is basically as needed, and everybody works for the common good. And you know, Thumper and DC, if you communicate with people telepathically,
there are no secrets.
There's no secrets. There's no secrets.
But you also have to respect the sovereignty of each
and they do
conference.
And they do.
Conscience. Yeah.
This is the amazing thing that so many people are going to have a very, very difficult time understanding, is that how you maintain your sovereignty in a situation where really you're moving forward to a common purpose. Everything is, you're basically volunteer. It's kind of what we do here on this channel. We volunteer toward a common mission, a common goal, a common purpose. And people out there in the what we call the matrix is, the world that doesn't have any kind of awakening going on. Those guys that are still glued to CNN on TV, they're out there, and they're, how can you even conceive of this and have it not thought of in terms of communist or collectivist or whatever? But it is so far removed from that, and exactly the opposite of it, that it's almost impossible to explain to someone who doesn't understand the concept of service to others rather than service to self.
That's right. I have friends that if I don't talk to them about sports, they have no interest in anything other than sports. They'll spend their entire weekend in front of a TV watching game after game after game, and with no interest in anything else. And it's sad, but that's the choice that they've made.
I cannot play video games. Video games to me are just. I've tried. When my kids were young. I was a single dad. I had 2 boys. We got some video games. And I could play them for 10, 15 minutes, and then I was like done. It takes you nowhere. It does nothing, in my opinion. Now, other people would argue that, but it just for me,
it's their choice. It's their choice.
But when you start getting into this stuff, if limitless energy that you're not paying a monthly bill for, the technologies that can basically create printers that could just print whatever you want at any time, or you might call them a replicator or whatever. I call them a printer, where you do this thing. So if and then the idea that resources on this planet are we're running out of resources, and you know, you go out into space and there's asteroids the size of a house that are solid gold, and
Yep.
and you know, there's in a limitless universe, all things are limitless, and you
Pretty
know,
much
if you get to
can't
the
run
idea,
out.
as we progress in our consciousness, our needs will become much different, and our abilities to see to those needs are going to be so much different than what we have in this reality now.
Let me share with you, a friend of mine would just to illustrate the amount of games that go on. He had access to read a report that was put together. It took a 5-year period, and geologists and scientists went to every oil well that had been drilled dry or pumped dry from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s all around the United States, okay? A 5-year program. Guess what they found?
More oil.
Everything's seeped up again. They're all full. They said they're keeping a lid on this information. They said if they released it, gas would drop to 10 or 15 cents a gallon. They said there's enough oil at current usage just for the United States alone for 1,000 years. It's all a big game.
It is. It's all about control.
I have been trying to wake people up to this for I don't know how long. That the Earth manufactures what we have been told are dinosaur bones.
Yep.
Yeah. The Earth manufactures fresh water.
Yep.
Well, you know, I you know, right after high school, I went up to Alaska and I worked on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline back in the latter part of the 70s. And when I got up there, I was surprised to find out on the North Slope of Alaska were facilities that had been built back in the 1950s, and they had been up there. They didn't just discover that oil in the late 60s, early 70s. No, they knew that oil has been up there since the 1950s and probably earlier than that. And they had actually built. There were buildings up there that had been built at the time. And so when you start seeing this stuff, Frank, you start to realize that we've
been lied to.
it's been a freaking game.
Yep, it's a game. It's a game.
And I've had, you know, just tremendous opportunities in my life to see so many different things.
And it opens your eyes. It really does.
It does. It definitely does.
I want to share with you a woman by the name of Joan Bird wrote a book called UFOs Over Montana. And she said that she started to do lecturing in Montana. And she said at the end of every one of her lectures, women would come forward talking about their own experiences with the visitors, many times visitors that look like us, and how positive the experiences have been. And I got a chance to meet Joan out in California. And I shared with her, we're going through a tremendous awakening, and we're moving into an awakening where a lot of women are being awakened before men are. And women that don't know each other have told me this story. They're spending between 60 to 70% of their awareness, not at this level of awareness or consciousness, at the other level of awareness and consciousness. And they said they can't tell their husbands, they can't tell their boyfriends because they don't understand. They're spending maybe 20 to 30% of their consciousness in this awareness that we're in right now. Every one of them have said, Frank, you can't believe how beautiful it is that we're going to be experiencing. And it's all positive. And I ask every one of them, and again, none of these women know each other. I say, how quickly do you see us achieving that? You know what they tell me? They say, Frank, it's going to occur in the twinkling of an eye. You'll be at this level of awareness. You'll blink your eye and you'll be at the next level of awareness and the true reality of what we're all about. And they said, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And they want to tell their husbands, they want to tell their boyfriends, but they're not open to hear it yet. So there's a tremendous nudging of consciousness that's going on.
I feel it. I see it. By the way, you baited our chat on the hunting lodge in.
Okay, I got to tell you this story. Now, Bill Tompkins left the aircraft industry and moved up to Medford, Oregon, and he started designing homes. He built 2 homes up there that you could go online and see them. But he got involved with the Navy League up there. He got involved with some of the work that the visitors were doing up there. And he happened to be visiting the county commissioner, and the county commissioner was married to Barry Goldwater's daughter, okay? So this is Barry Goldwater's son-in-law, who's the county commissioner for that part of Oregon. I forget the county that Medford's in. So they're at the county commissioner's office, and they get a phone call that they've been invited to a luncheon at a hunting lodge.
I think that's Klamath County.
Klamath County? Okay, that's probably it. So they're given directions to go to this hunting lodge. So it's about maybe 15, maybe 16 miles outside of town. So it's in a very rural area. And along the way, they keep seeing signs, yellow signs that says hunting lodge, okay? So they get to the base of this quite steep hill, and there's a logging trail there. And there's a yellow sign that says, this way to hunting lodge. So thank God they're in 4x4 vehicles. They took, I believe they took 2 vehicles or 3 vehicles with the individuals that were invited for the luncheon. And they're going up this logging trail that's very steep. It hadn't been used in a long time. And they get to the top of this hill, and at the top of the hill, they find this immaculate parking lot with no roads leading to it, except this logging trail. So they pull onto the asphalt, and they drive around, and they see this incredible hunting lodge that looks to be maybe 30 feet high and maybe 60, 80, maybe 100 feet deep. So it's all made out of wood, beautiful, and there's no other cars in the parking lot, and they park, and they go over and they knock on the door, and the door's partially open. So they walk in, and they're in this incredible hunting lodge with vaulted ceilings, with all these animal heads that are mounted of deer and a fox and bear and things like that. And they're in there for about 5 minutes, and all of a sudden, a side door opens up, and a woman comes out and said, "Oh, we're glad that you're here. We wanted you to come here for a luncheon today." And they open up the doors to the luncheon area, and these beautiful tables are set up, but they're wooden tables. And there's probably maybe 30 people in there at the hunting lodge, and the 8 visitors that were invited, the county commissioner and Bill Tompkins and several others. So they're having their lunch, and all of a sudden Bill said, the tables, the chairs, and the floor all change to, it looks like glass, okay? It's all see-through. Everything looks modernistic. They could see through the floor, and they're leaving Earth.
Oh my.
The hunting lodge is a craft. So it changes to its real shape, and it takes them to a planet where they see these cities on this planet, and they're told information about this, okay? They're given a tour of the planet. They don't land, but they're flying low enough to see all these futuristic cities and seeing other craft that are flying, other, starships. So they said, we have to go back to Earth. They start coming back to Earth, and as they're lowering down, they could see that they're getting closer and closer to the top of this hill. Everything changes back to wooden chairs, wooden tables, and wooden floors, okay? They thank everybody for coming, and they said, we look forward to seeing you again soon. And they leave, they say goodbye. Bill's blown away by it, so is the county commissioner. Well, they eventually go back, and their memories are erased, all of them with the exception of Bill Tompkins and the county commissioner. Bill told me that the county commissioner contacted Goldwater, told him about it. Of course, he told his wife about it. They would ask him to return, and he would take off for 2 or 3 weeks at a time off planet. And I said, Bill, did his family know that he was going off planet? He said, yes, he told his family he was going off planet. Now, the county commissioner passed, and
That was Jackson County, by the way.
Jackson County, is that what it was?
Yes.
He had
correct.
2 sons, and his sons were contacted about maybe coming forward and talking about the father, and they said no. They did not want any attention drawn to themselves, but they said, whatever Bill Tompkins told you about our father, it's true, because they were best friends. And he said, Bill Tompkins used to take us boys fishing when he lived up here.
Wow.
I mean, that is an incredible story, but it showed they could mask their craft to look like that hunting lodge, and it wasn't a hunting lodge. It was a starship. And they even had the parking lot with no roads leading up to it except the logging trail that looked like it hadn't been used in 20 years.
Well, you know, I happen to know somebody that has a Jeep and lives in Oregon. We might have.
Well, yes, I do. Actually, we may have to take us a little bit of a road trip here.
Yeah.
Or if you have drone capability, send drones out to see what you pick up. But just look for a logging trail right off of. There's a major route that they took out of Medford, going west, and they followed it to. It was like maybe 15, 16 miles outside of town along this route, and they came to the base of this hill that had this logging trail, and the sign said hunting lodge. They were all yellow signs, and Bill Tompkins said that the county commissioner's sons went back and grabbed all the signs because the father told him about what the experience was.
So the signs aren't there anymore. Oh man.
No, the signs are not. No, the signs were just there for them. I mean, it's a great story. It's unbelievable.
It's a fascinating story, and
it really is.
The idea that we have been so programmed. I hate to keep using that same word, but in
this case, it's accurate.
It is accurate.
Well, Bill would say we've been lied to, and
we've been lied.
People have to wake up from the lies, and he said that a lot of the education, the higher institutions of higher learning, they've perpetrated things that are not valid. The physics that they use off planet are not the physics that are here. In other words, there's errors in the Maxwell equations. I was told by Dr. Bob Wood, he said they found those errors back in the 50s and they corrected them, and it opened up the doorway to the stars.
Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing that Deadcat and I have been discussing, and that was after watching your video, is the 1,000 years ahead in technology. Now, if you consider that, you know, when we first recovered some of the downed alien craft, and the discovery of fiber optics, I understand Velcro and
yes,
some of these things that
lasers, cell phones, all that.
Yeah, all that stuff. And when you start looking at when that technology became available to us. Now DC is really good at telling us, much better at telling this part of it than I am. So I'm going to turn it over to him. He knows where I'm going. So DC,
what is it you're specifically?
How technology, once we've achieved the transistor and the computers, and how that technology has.
Oh, the Moore's Law thing.
Yeah, the Moore's Law. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I'm familiar with that. The theory, and I guess it's fairly well proven, but until you run it out to the infinite end, the theory never does change from a theory. But the Moore's Law theory is that every 18 months, the computer power doubles. And it doubles in an exponential way. It 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. It doubles in that way, so that over a period of 18 months times 30, you've got multiple millions of times of increased capabilities there. And so what when you say 1,000 years in the future, the technology is 1,000 years ahead of what we have. Is that like exponential form of 1,000, or is that like we're looking at actually time in time of 1,000 years? I mean, how does that work?
I think we're looking at in terms of 1,000 years of what we understand right now.
So if given the technology that we have now, as we are led to understand it by the lines,
Yes.
it would take us 1,000 years to get to that level.
Yep. But we're there already.
We are at right now.
We're there already. Yep.
But yeah,
When Bob Wood saw that chart and he said, Frank, everything on this chart has been accomplished decades ago. And when I got the chart from Colonel Ware, I said, Colonel Ware, I always thought there were maybe 50, 75, 100 years in advance of what the public knew. He said, no, Frank, it's 1,000 years. And I said to Bill Tompkins, I said, Bill, I thought it was 50, 75, 100 years. He said, no, Colonel Ware's right. It's 1,000 years in advance of what the common man knows. He said, we are so far advanced. And up to the time that he passed, he was still working on advanced design for solar warden craft. Unbelievable stuff.
Now on
You
that,
saw some of the designs, Thumper?
oh yeah.
Incredible stuff. Incredible stuff.
Now on this chart, I took a screenshot of the chart here, and I've got a really good high resolution shot of it here that I'm going to put up on the screen for everybody.
Good.
Now, can you kind of, I've got 3 different screenshots because I had to take it in 3 different pieces. I'm looking at the very top section of the chart right now. And can you kind of walk through that chart with our live chat and kind of explain what you know of what's here? And I'll try to follow along and point it out as we kind of go through this.
Okay. How could I view that? Should I go on YouTube?
If you can see it on YouTube, I think it's it's representing pretty well there on YouTube right now.
It's pretty clean right now. Yeah, if you go onto YouTube, that link that I gave you, it should bring that picture up in the main part of the screen.
Okay, let me try doing that. And that's
Patriot
WebZoom US.
You just go to you're just going to go into YouTube and go to the
hyperdrive.
Let me throw you the link once again in an email.
Okay, I just can't put search hyperdrive, right?
No, it'll be under Patriot Soapbox live stream.
Yeah, that would work there.
Patriot Soapbox
live stream.
Okay.
Yep. Hold on here, and I'll get.
They do try to hide our. Are you seeing it now?
We the People 24/7 Patriot Soapbox stream.
That's us.
That's us.
That's it. Okay.
Yep. And by the way, Thumper said that we have 6,000. We're closer to 70,000.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Well, that's
great. Okay, I see the chart. I see the chart.
Okay.
What section did you want me to see where it says that they're going to form habitats out in space? Bill told me, he said that was the design all along, and he said that when what was the guy in Europe, Gary McKinnon, who tapped into the Navy and Defense database and pulled out the ship-to-ship transfers, and they're not naval ships that are down here; they're ships that are upstairs.
Right.
That's what he tapped into. He tapped into Solar Warden, and there's thousands of people in that fleet up there.
And you keep mentioning Solar Warden, and could you clarify for our audience what Solar Warden is?
Oh, Solar Warden is a Navy program of using technology to travel off planet and to accomplish things beyond planet Earth. And it's Solar Warden. That's what the Navy calls it.
And that is the completely. Now they've segmented. My understanding is they've segmented this thing out. Whereas Solar Warden is going to be one of the last things that is disclosed. They're going to. It
could very well be. It could very well be. But Bill thought that when Colonel Ware was given this to make it available to us, that we're very close to disclosure. He said because this tells it all. Mm-hmm. And his original concept for this was it should be read horizontally, not vertically. Mm-hmm. And He said the mind could accept it and comprehend it much better in the horizontal format. And Bob Wood said, I've seen the original that Bill has, and it is in a horizontal format. And he said the mind could assimilate it much better. But Rockwell wanted to do it in a vertical format. You know,
well, I think in the horizontal format, you're kind of used to reading timelines in much of the way we read is from left to right. So
yes.
Left being older, right being newer. So, you'd start out with the beginning over on the left-hand side and then read and then watch that timeline as it goes along. Very easy to follow. I do agree.
I agree too. I agree. And if you notice in the reference box, it outlines the type of craft that's needed to accomplish each one of those goals.
Mm-hmm.
So the craft that were needed, Bill designed the craft that were needed, and he started working on that in 1952. And I have some of the designs of things that they're still going to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
unbelievable stuff.
There's this column here. It says Earth to orbit and in space transportation systems, and it starts at the top. The Ariane 3, the Ariane 4, Titan 2, on down, Titan 4, Starfire / SSI, Pegasus, OSC, just all of these things. And the live chat out there, if you're able to see my pointer there, when this is a PDF or screenshot, so my pointer changes to something that's really hard to see anyway. But it's on the right-hand side of the screen, right adjacent to the big orange circle there on the top section of the chart.
Okay, yeah, I see the big orange circle, the proliferation of manned reusable spacecraft.
Right.
Okay.
And then right next to that, those little boxes, and those are the vehicles that are
needed to accomplish that.
Needed to accomplish this, and as well as you start at the top. And you have the critical path, American Shuttle Program, the NSTS, and that's 1983. Starts in 1983 on this. Now, let's see, 1983. Well, we had the shuttles well before 1983.
Yep.
Into the 70s, yes.
Yeah, back in the 70s. So even the things being depicted on this were accomplished before what they've got on this chart here.
That's right.
Fascinating.
Okay, question about that. One of the I saw it out in live chat a couple of times, and I've been wondering about that too. Have they always had these rocket launches that we've done that everybody gets, glued to the screen and watches these things take place? And Q actually said that the moon landing was a real thing, that we actually—
It was, yes, it was real.
69. Has all this technology been revealed since 1969, or has it been like a smoke and mirrors thing just to mollify the crowds so that they can—
NASA has always been a distraction to what's really going on. I knew a fellow when I moved to California. His name is Bill Hamilton. He was an incredible researcher. He had a general that was telling him inside information about the military doing tunnel drilling to kind of duplicate the tunnels that the visitors had made here hundreds of thousands of years ago. And he said that we're building facilities to link all military bases underground. And he said they had the ability of being able to go to Mars and set up facilities on Mars in 1960. And he said they were bringing engineers there for 6-month periods, and that they could not bring married men there. They were single men because they would be away from their families for 6 months, and they would be brought back to Earth. And I asked Bill Tompkins about that. I said, Bill, did we have the capability of going to Mars in 1960? He said, yes, we were definitely there in 1960.
Amazing.
There's a book called The Search for Zero Point, or The Hunt for Zero Point. I think it was by Nick Pope. And in it, he found one of the G boys. They were called the Gravity Boys of Westinghouse. And their task was to defeat gravity. and he found one of the G boys that was still alive. He was in his 90s, and he finally agreed to talk briefly to Nick Pope, and he said, "Yep, we overcame gravity in the early 50s."
Well, Tesla,
So
look at the work Tesla was doing back in the late 1800s and early.
Oh
1900s.
yes, yes.
I mean, for crying out loud. And you know, and that brings up another tie-in to what's going on in our world politically and with our country and everything. And that is, you know, John Trump, President Trump's uncle, was somebody who knew Tesla, had been around him a lot, and was also responsible for basically grabbing and archiving all of his documentation for the work that he'd been doing. And so a lot of people are kind of thinking that with that being in the Trump family, that the possibility that President Trump is very well aware of what's going on. And it's one reason why he's having such tremendous success in what he's trying to do, what his team is trying to do, and the fact that, you know, I personally believe, and I think other people out there actually have thrown around the idea that you know, he's getting a lot of help from visitors.
Well, I believe that the Disclosure Project is going to be as non-political as possible, as not religious as possible.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make it as generic and as innocent for people to accept as possible, because they don't want any more egos to be tied into any of this.
Mm-hmm.
The time for all that is past.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what's occurring in Antarctica. I was told that they brought National Geographic in to film this. They don't want to have any religious affiliation or any political affiliation with it, that it's going to be done in this 3-stage process. The first stage is going to be that they're going to reveal that there was an advanced technology here, an advanced civilization, but they're going to say it was planetary, not that it was extraterrestrial. Then they're going to release the technology. That's going to be the second phase, and the third phase is they're going to say that they were visitors. So it's a 3-phase program.
Mm-hmm.
But they want National Geographic to film it so people can't say, oh, that's the left doing it, or that's the right doing it, or that's the Christians doing it, or the Jews, or whatever. They're going to make it as generic as possible, so that people could assimilate this information.
They have to. This is something that goes beyond politics.
Yes. Yes. It's a cosmic drama. It's a cosmic drama we're living through.
Absolutely. That goes back to me saying, throw away the box. Throw away what we have constructed here as an acceptable way of life, because it's been contrived to control, to enslave, to, you know, limit our ability to move past this and on to greater a greater existence. I mean, that's the promise that most of our religions promise, is that, you know, we will move on to, you know, something bigger and greater, and we'll find peace, we'll find knowledge, and it will be for the greater good of all of creation.
Thumper in DC, I'd like to share this with you. What one contactee told me, he said that when disclosure occurs, people are going to be shocked to know that galactics have been living amongst us. And I said, in what way? And he said, there have been visitors living here amongst us 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And he said, they're in neighborhoods all around the planet. And he said, when people see that their neighbors that they may have known for 10, 20, 30, 40 years are non-threatening, it'll be more acceptable for them to accept that we're part of a cosmic family. I was told that there's galactics living in every neighborhood. They came down here to be part of this, be part of the awakening.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've heard the idea of star seeds, light workers, and
yes,
and that. What is it that you're aware of along those lines?
I'm aware that a lot of people are being awakened as to who they truly are, that they volunteered to come down here to be part of all this. And as I mentioned to you a little bit earlier, more women are being awakened. It's like the quickening has occurred within them. Their DNA has been activated. And from what we're being told by a lot of these contactees, it's the trigger that's coming out of the sun's energy that's accelerating the DNA. And we're all going to raise to that level of awareness. But women are going through that first and are being awakened to it and being more receptive and open and more communicative about it.
Well, it's funny because my next door neighbor, they're both they're wonderful people, and they're about 15 years younger than I am, and his wife is just a wonderful person, and excuse me. And, he's very into the alien stuff. And if he didn't have to go to work tomorrow morning, he'd be sitting here listening to the show or sitting in my living room here
Yes.
watching it. But they are, she says, I don't like labels. I don't want labels. They've pulled their youngest daughter out of school and they're homeschooling now. Because they see what's going on and they just don't agree with it.
Yes.
And it's fascinating to talk to them because we were finding some common ground in this whole idea of disclosure, and it's amazing, Frank, how many people are actually saying, give it to us. Pull the Band-Aid off. But then you go around and you talk to some other people, and they're still worried about, some of the most, and I don't mean to demean it, but some of the most mundane things.
Yes.
I just, when you compare what we're talking about here tonight to some of the conversations that the people are having out in our world right now, I shake my head and I go, don't you understand? We're on the precipice. And as Mr. Purple Tie out here in the live chat says, his question is, ask Frank if he agrees with me. We do have front row seats to the greatest show in this parsec of the galaxy, right?
That's right. We certainly do. Yes. And there's more and more craft that are making themselves known and apparent. I happen to have a problem with my phone system, and I had a Verizon tech support person come in and attend to it. So something prompted me to ask him, do you have much experience in military? And he said, yes. He was involved in special forces, both in Iraq and also in Afghanistan. And I said to him, have you had any unusual experiences? And he looked at me and he said, to what degree? I said, regarding visitors, craft. And he was shocked that I asked him that. And he told me that when he got out of special forces, there was a woman that works in special forces with him, and she works for one of the alphabet agencies. He wouldn't tell me which one it was, but he said it's her job. She goes in, it's in Washington, D.C., and she's to take satellite photographs and airbrush out all the disks that are coming into Earth's atmosphere. And he said, she's a fundamentalist. She was raised as a fundamentalist. She said she's never known about any of this before. And she said she's airbrushing out hundreds of craft from photographs every day. And she said all different types of ships, all different types of designs. None of them are ours. So it is occurring. Something is occurring.
I want to get invited to the convention. That's all.
Yep.
Yeah, really.
I have a good friend in North Carolina that he was in the service in the Air Force, and he was stationed in Texas in 1960. And he said the entire base was called to the theater, to the base theater. And they said that they had a duty-free day, but they had to be at the base theater. And the commanding officer said, you're going to be shown 2 segments of film, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So it's going to be 4 hours in the morning, a lunch break for an hour, and 4 hours in the afternoon. And he said, we want you to pay attention to this. Commanding officer stepped off the stage, the lights dimmed, and they were shown in the morning 4 hours of footage, black and white, color, of ships, saucers, cigar-shaped saucers, diving into the ocean, coming out of the ocean, going around naval ships, going around Air Force facilities. Crystal clear, 4 hours, okay?
So not these pixelated, fuzzy.
No, these are
items
clear
that we get to
footage,
see.
okay? Then they break for an hour. He said, my friend Jerry said, nobody said anything during lunch. They ate quietly. It's like they were in shock. Then they went back again for 4 hours in the afternoon, from 1 to 5. More footage, motion picture footage, black and white, color, still footage of the craft landing, taking off, flying around, doing all kinds of incredible acrobatics. 5 o'clock, the commanding officer, the lights come up, the commanding officer comes up, and he said, we want you to see this because we want you to know that if you see anything like this, you don't have to tell us because we already know about it. And he said, if that bothers you, talk to your commanding officer. If you don't get satisfaction talking to your commanding officer, your company commander, he said, talk to the base, what are the base deacon?
Right.
I forget what they're called.
Chaplains.
Chaplain, yeah. Talk to the chaplain.
Yeah.
If that doesn't satisfy you, talk to the base psychiatrist. We don't want to hear about it. Now listen, I'm telling you this. I told George Filer about it. George Filer got a chance to talk to this fella, and he said, Frank, I've heard stories about this before. He said, this is the first time I've heard someone who actually participated in it and saw all this. Now listen to this. I wanted this person to come forward and talk publicly. He told me he shared this information with the pastor of his church. About 3 days later, he gets a knock on the door. Government people came to him and he said, we want to talk to you about what you shared with the pastor. His pastor turned him in.
Well,
so, he shared this privately with me, and he shared it privately with George Filer. And I've been trying to encourage him to come out and talk about it. I said, because you had this experience in 1960. They had all this footage in 1960. They know all this is going on. They know it.
Well, again, there are activities that are going on the moon, and we've got the Hubble Space Telescope that can take these pictures of I think they call it the Horsehead Nebula or something like that.
Yep.
But we get these crappy pixelated images that are fed to us, and I mean, for crying out loud, my phone can take better pictures than what we see coming off the International Space Station, for crying out loud.
Well,
are you kidding me?
Thumper in DC, I want to tell you folks, you need to subscribe to George Filer's newsletter. It's called Filer's Files. It's published free of charge weekly. He gets information from insiders. He has unretouched photographs of Mars that shows trees and lakes and shrubbery, unretouched. He was out in Los Angeles, and he gave a presentation of the truth about Mars, showing some of these photographs. At the end of it, 2 people from the Jet Propulsion Labs had come up to hear this lecture, and they complimented Major Filer. They said, what you're showing is real. They said, we can't talk about these things, but you're telling people the truth. And I would recommend you get his newsletter. It's called Filer's Files. It's a free subscription. It comes out weekly. It gives you incredible information about what's going on and how people are being prepared for what's going to be coming out.
Now, I believe you provided a link in that. DC sent me he reset that email that you had all that information on.
Good.
And I believe there's a link to that in there. Is that correct?
Yep, there is.
Excellent.
And I tell you, your audience needs to get that information because the intelligence agencies know what George is doing, and they've basically put a blessing on it as well to move forward with it.
Well, I believe that, it was kind of funny. When we first started the channel back in January of 2018, we actually started when Q started posting back in October. of 2017. And, we were mainly Q-centric, what was happening with Q, and diving into, the questions and everything there. And then we started into the news and things like that. But we've expanded as Q has expanded what they are inspiring people to research and come to an understanding themselves. It's so much different than being told what's going on.
Yes.
Q is asking the questions, and people are researching and finding out for themselves, and then discerning for themselves. Fact or fiction, whatever. And then there was a Q&A, and I don't remember what time of the year it was last year that there was a little Q allowed the people on the boards to ask questions, and one of the questions was about Roswell and did we really go to the moon and everything. And Q's response to those questions was to the Roswell question, highly classified, and to the did we really go to the moon? Yes. And is the Earth flat? No.
Right. Yeah.
And it was at that point that a time frame opened up on our channel here. Now, Deadcat and I had been doing our morning shows and everything, and kind of having this just idea of where this was all leading, which compelled me to become involved in Patriot Soapbox and what we're doing here.
Yes.
And so many of us that are here, we were all, for some reason, brought here to this platform to do what we're doing.
You're nudging consciousness. It's absolutely, you guys are nudging consciousness. Absolutely.
And the funny thing is, I started saying, as different things came out. Now, I'm not a really good decoder of the Q codes and things like that, but I have other information and other things that I've delved into, such as a lot of this stuff. I have a working knowledge, nowhere near what you have, obviously, and some of the other people that are into it. And I have a lot of questions, which are the same questions that we have from our live chat out there. And,
well, listen, Thumper, we're all students. We're all still learning. We're all students.
There's so much to learn. I want to learn it all. Download it to me. Come on.
Truly.
Yeah, plug me into the back of my neck and download the thing in, like in Matrix.
Are you getting any other questions that we could maybe address?
Oh, absolutely. Let's see. What do we got out here? You guys, let's see here.
We've got a lot of people throwing snarky comments.
Let's see. Let's see. One of the questions early on was we did that Valiant Thor.
Yes. Valiant Thor is from Venus, and he volunteered for this mission of awakening consciousness here on this planet. And if you and your audience remember the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still with Michael Rene,
right,
that was like a precursor to the actual event of Valiant Thor coming to spend time at the Pentagon. And I'll tell you this, George Fowler will tell you this in more detail. He was on a flight from Los Angeles to Chicago. And this was when, if you were in uniform, they would bump you up into first class.
Mm-hmm.
So Major Fowler was in uniform, and he said, they said, Mr. Fowler, would you like to be bumped up into first class? We have a seat available for you. And he said, sure, that'd be great. So they walk him into first class, and he recognizes the person immediately that he's going to be sitting next to. He's reading a newspaper. The guy folds the newspaper, he puts it down, and he said to George, do you know who I am? And he said, yes, you're the actor who played the space being in The Day the Earth Stood Still was Michael Rene. He said, yes. He said, the government asked me to participate in this film. And he said, I've done some other work for the government as well. And they wanted this information to come out to the public. Robert Wise, who directed that film, one of the last interviews that he did before he passed away, he said, and he's done a lot of incredible work as a director, that was the most special film that he had ever done. And he also revealed in it that the opening sequence where you see a saucer coming around the Earth and coming across Washington as it's getting ready to land at that
Mhm.
baseball field
Mm-hmm.
is real footage. It was given to him by the government.
Oh, for
Oh,
crying out loud.
It's real footage. So that was a precursor to the true Valiant Thor story. And there are people that have seen, there was a short film made about The Stranger at the Pentagon by Craig Campobasso. He's a director out in Hollywood. And I got a chance to see it, and he's been going around the country. He's won awards for it. And when he shows it, people come up after the film is done, and they said they have seen Valiant Thor. He looks the same as in those photographs that were taken behind Howard Minger's house back in 1957. He does not age.
Hmm. Oh boy, I had a question. I brain farted it. Oh darn.
I have a question. Do you suppose these people who have, because of kind of the necessity to keep up the ruse that have, quote, passed away, unquote, do you suppose they have taken that 32 to 34-year-old pill and are now living another entirely different life under another name?
I believe that's indeed possible. I know that several contactees, their wives felt that their husbands did not pass away, that the bodies that actually passed were android bodies.
Interesting.
Yep. And their husbands are still working with the visitors upstairs.
Now the question I had was, my understanding is that disclosure, they've attempted disclosure in the past and bringing these things out, but there is a component, the deep state, the cabal, whatever you want to call it, that does not want this to happen. They are going to do anything and everything they can in order to stop this from happening. And as a result, you have some of the major man-made disasters, 9/11 being one, even World War, or the Korean War, or some of these things that have
Been orchestrated
to sidetrack this
Yep.
this next step in our journey to join the galactic community.
Yep. No, I'm absolutely, I agree totally with that. But they're not going to be able to succeed because the tide is turning against them, and they can't hold back the dawn. This is going to occur. This is going to occur.
Well, as Corey Goode put it in the Cosmic Disclosure series, it's the raising of the consciousness, the idea of service to others instead of service to self. It's and when you think about that and all that implies, and then you add in technologies that basically break the chain that the money changers have on us, and what does that actually mean as far as our exercising our free will and our sovereignty as as an individual.
Yes.
And so there's, again, that's where, throw the box away.
Yep.
Start
with a clean slate. Start with a clean slate.
Well, and when you think about it, Deadcat and I you could make shows out of our debrief calls after every one of our shows.
Yeah, he had mentioned that to me. He said they're so interesting, they should be filmed.
I told him about our talk this morning. I said it actually carried on for as long as our show went on.
Yeah.
It was another 2 hours that we were discussing this stuff. Yeah.
I may have shared this with the after show. Yeah.
I may have shared this with DC that when Corey Goode got together with Dr. Bob Wood and Michael Sala over at Bill Tompkins's place, Bill had his wife clear the dining room table off, and he unfolded the integrated space chart.
Mm-hmm.
And when Corey saw it, he jumped back. He said, "I never thought I'd ever see this." And he said, "If it wasn't for your work, I would never have been able to do what work I did." He said, "Your work laid the foundation for what we're accomplishing up there."
And that's incredible, isn't it?
It really is incredible. It's really incredible. And Bill was no ego about him. There was no ego about him. And he said, Frank, I just want the information to come out, the truth to come out. He said, it's so freeing. And he said, the ships that he designed that are 17 kilometers long, 15 miles long, he said they could hold 50,000 people at a time. They're enormous ships.
That's
Well,
amazing.
when you think about it, okay, I live about 5 miles from the center of town.
Yes.
And so go another 5 miles north, and then do a stack 'em and pack 'em, which would basically be a ship of that size. Besides the operational areas, but the habitational areas of a ship that size, it's not hard to imagine that many people on a craft that large.
Bill said that they are being built at the base of the Wasatch Mountains in Utah, opposite from Salt Lake City. And he said they've designed these 2 enormous doors. Each door is 20 city square blocks, okay? And he said they open up, and he said when they open up, the foliage, the cactus, the sand, everything else, they open so smoothly that it doesn't disrupt anything. The ship takes off that's built there, okay, and of course goes into its mission in space. And he said then the doors close back up again. And he said nobody knows that it's going on.
That's incredible. And I've skied the Wasatch Range, and
it's enormous. It's enormous.
They're incredible mountains, and they just rise up out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
But it's
imagine doors. Each door is 20 city square blocks. It opens up, opens down, so that the craft could go out or come back in.
Well, they did several episodes on the Stargate series of just exactly that.
Yeah.
They were building the spacecraft that from Earth technology and off-world technology, and it was being built out in the middle of a desert, and the door opens up and the craft comes out of it, and I'll tell you what, you didn't light that thing up with rockets. You had to have some kind of amazing anti-gravity, or else can you imagine the rockets necessary? You'd have woken up the Western Hemisphere.
That's right. You don't need them. You don't need them.
And melted the mountains.
Yeah.
You don't need them.
Interestingly enough, my brother is vacationing right there right now. Suppose I could convince him to go wait for the mountain to open up.
Well, it's actually at the base of the mountains. That facility where the doors open up, it's basically at the floor of the base of the mountain on the opposite side of Salt Lake City.
Well, I have a question from out in YouTube. Mr. Purple Tie asks, do all civilizations start as blindly as we are?
Not as blindly as we are. It's like we're the classroom of the galaxy.
Were the guys wearing the dunce caps in the corner?
And you know what? The Earth has allowed all this to occur here, and now it's time for graduation. And the graduation is the level of awareness and consciousness that's going to break us free of all the nonsense. All the ego and all the personality, all that stuff gets set aside.
The Stoliex is one of our regular live chatters out there. And he's asking, will you please ask Frank why JFK murder was off limits?
Yeah, that's
because our country took him down.
Mm-hmm.
The Vietnam War was generating, what was it, $6 billion a month in industrial sales? And we left all that equipment there.
Lady Bird Johnson owned the construction companies that were over there building the bases.
I had a cousin who was over there, and he took photographs of Goodyear tire plantations and Exxon, oil facilities there. When he came back, they confiscated all his photographs. They said, "You can't bring any of this back." When I was working in Atlanta, I was working with a guy who was in the Air Force in Vietnam, and he told me he happened to go into the commanding officer's office when he had photographs, aerial photographs that were on the table, and he happened to see the bombing runs They were supposed to be bombing the Ho Chi Minh Trail, where they were dropping 500-pound bombs.
Mhm.
He said, Frank, not one bomb was dropped on the trail. There were bombs on either side of the trail. He said, if they had bombed the trail, they wouldn't have been able to move anything up and down that trail. He said, the commanding officer came in and caught Doug in there and reamed him out. He said, don't you ever come in here again. Don't you ever talk about what you saw. He said they were dropping bombs where they didn't need to drop bombs.
Oh, well, you know, let's look at that again. How many people are going to be just absolutely astounded and
Angry.
pissed off
Yeah.
that NASA is basically a multi-billion-dollar kabuki theater put on so that nobody does wake up?
Yeah. But we got to get past all that. We have to show forgiveness and say, listen, what's past is past. We need to move forward.
And that's exactly, I 100% agree.
Yeah. You can't drag the past into the future. You
That's
can't.
you
That's
can't.
exactly what we discussed this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What,
You have to let go of all that garbage. You got to let go of all that garbage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just
And
know that a higher presence or a higher force will take care of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to have to move on. Yeah, you
Yep.
just have to. Some people were caught up in all of this through no fault of their own. I mean, they had to have a job. They had to put a roof over their heads. They had to feed their families. Any number of reasons why we got caught up in all of this, and it's all been contrived. It's all been manipulated. No question about that. But when you're offered the opportunity to, if you could pick up your house and move it to the next state where all of this stuff wasn't going on, would you look back?
No, I would not. I wouldn't look back.
I wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't look back.
I wouldn't look back at all. Because the new adventure is ahead of you.
Yeah.
So
again,
you want to go back to kindergarten? You want to go back to first grade? No, I much prefer moving on and learning more and advancing just my experiences. And
I would as well. As well. Thumper in DC, I want to tell you that I had met two men, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, that both were going through a seminary program. They wanted to become priests. And before they could take their final vows, they had to swear secrecy to these points that I'm going to mention to you right now. They had to swear secrecy to reincarnation, that Jesus was married to Magdalene and they had children, that there are inhabited planets other than Earth. And both of them said, how can we be priests and try to be truthful to our congregations, and we can't share that? So both of them did not take their final vows, and they became so disillusioned that was being kept from people.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
can you imagine? The church knows it.
Can you imagine what's buried under the Vatican?
Oh, I want to share this with you. I met a girl through a friend of mine who would study 10th and 11th century flute compositions, and she's really brilliant. And the greatest repository of that is the Vatican Library. So she applied to the Vatican Library to study 10th and 11th century flute manuscripts. And they got back to her after about 6 or 8 weeks, and they said, we approve you to come here for 2 weeks. So she went to the Vatican Library. She went down 6 levels, okay? 6 levels down. She was told there's 10 levels there. The 6th level was where they kept all the music archives. And she was led to an area, and she was given gloves, and she was able to take photographs of the manuscripts from the 10th and 11th century. And I said to her, I said, Edith, I said, how large was it? She said, it was so immense. She said the lighting was perfect. It was sterile down there. Everything was ultra clean. He said she told me if there were 10,000 men on the 6th level and they were separated apart from each other, she said you wouldn't see them. That's how big the 6th level was.
They have collected artifacts throughout history.
Yep.
And locked it up there, locked it away.
Like
And
people think that the Great Library of Alexandria was burned. The most important pieces were secreted out of there. They're in the Vatican Library. The things that were destroyed were the meaningless scrolls and manuscripts that were really, they were not sensitive. They were not important. They were burnt. The other ones were saved.
I find it amazing. You mentioned earlier this evening that a lot of our history has been
The hidden history, yes.
set aside and is being held so that they can educate the population of the planet when the time is right of the true history of Earth. And
Thumper, this planet is 4.5 billion years old. Our recorded history only goes back, what, 8, 10, 12,000 years?
right.
And if you watch the History Channel, National Geographic, they're talking about the pyramids and the Sphinx maybe being 75 to 100,000 years old.
Well, and the fact that
It changes a lot, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it definitely does. And the fact that the pyramids, when you look at them scientifically, they have found no mummies. No, they weren't burial tombs.
No.
And the idea that they were power generation plants using piezoelectric techniques. And if you look at the materials, there's granite, there's limestone, there's I'm forgetting the other element that was used, but I mean, those materials had to be collected from different areas in order to build these massive structures, and to build them in a very precise manner. The sarcophaguses, these big one piece, machined to 10,000ths of an inch in flatness on these things that were basically the enclosures of a battery.
Yes.
I mean, we have been led to believe that they built those things with wood mallets and chisels.
Yep.
But you don't get 10,000ths of an inch accuracy with a wood mallet.
With a mallet, right?
Yeah, and you're talking about rocks that are shaved and cut so closely tolerance together that water doesn't even flow between them.
That's right. You can't slide a piece of paper between them.
Yeah.
I happened to see on PBS a program of a girl at the University of Alabama who created a new type of lens and film that they could take photographs at satellite level and penetrate the ground with the camera. And they used Egypt to start utilizing this technology.
Mm-hmm.
And they were shocked at what they found buried underneath the sand. Take a guess of what percentage is still yet to be uncovered in Egypt. Take a guess.
Let's put it this
Just
way:
take a guess.
the idea that it was a very, very lush environment at one time.
Yes, yes. But things that are still buried under sand there that this camera revealed that can be excavated. Take a guess what percentage?
I would guess, since it's the cradle of humanity, 50%.
Is that your final answer?
I'll stick with that. DC, what's yours?
99%.
It's 80%.
80%. Okay.
They said archaeologists are beside themselves of other pyramids that are buried there, temples that are buried, other structures that appear to be intact. Intact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That are buried.
I think they're afraid to unbury them. I think they probably know a lot of that's there, but if they move the sand away, they're going to have it's going to create disclosure.
Yeah, they're going to have to explain themselves, but there'll be some splaining to do.
George will share this story with you, but he publishes this newsletter called Filer's Files, and a woman who won Teacher of the Year in New Jersey was one of 49 other teachers that were named best teachers in their state. They were invited by Egypt for an expense-paid trip to Egypt. Okay, so she went there with 49 other teachers, and it was just each individual teacher, which was named the best teacher, and they were taken to the Giza Plateau and they were taken inside of a building. Now she's telling this to George. They didn't know what to expect. They go inside this building, and it's a massive elevator. She said they must have gone down several hundred feet. They land at a station that's underground, that's like a subway platform, except there's no subways. She said there's 4 armed guards there, and she said everything is the most incredible mosaic inlay in this platform, and she said there's 4 tube tunnels going off in different directions. And she said the walls of the tunnels don't have any railings in there. The sides look like glass. They're so smooth. And they were permitted to take photographs. And they were told by the Egyptian government that they could share this information with family and friends, but not to publicize it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This woman was blown away by what she had seen. She said they were told this was created by a much earlier civilization, and it looked brand new, okay? It wasn't done by the Egyptians, it was done by someone else. She contacted George when she came back, and she said, I'd like to put these photographs in your newsletter so your readers can see this. After she made that call to George, it's like she dropped out of sight. Apparently she was not to publicize these because she wanted him to see them, and she wanted them to be printed in his newsletter. And she was told it was only to share with family and friends. And she said every one of the teachers were as astounded as she was for what they were shown.
Mm-hmm.
They had no idea they were going to be shown that.
You know, can you imagine sitting on so much of this and not be able to share it? Not, you know, I mean, the cognitive dissonance that would cause within the person that actually knows this stuff. And you start
That's why there's so many whistleblowers coming forward, Thumper in DC. There's so many whistleblowers, and there's so many people I've met that want to share their stories, and they're hoping to have the forum to do it. And I'm trying to encourage as many as possible to come forward and share this information.
Well, bring them here. Bring them here. I mean, we are volunteers. None of us are getting paid for it. We do not rely on sponsors or anybody else. And this is a free speech platform. And you know, if people have a story to tell, we are, you know, I'll drink two pots of coffee in the night, you know, if it takes it.
You guys will have fun with Major Filer. He's got some incredible stories to share. And as I told you, he met the individuals himself that look like us that are visitors here.
Mm-hmm. No, I am so ready to blow the whistle on all this stuff. I want to learn.
It creates a real sense of joy within you when
does.
you know the truth of this, when you know that we're part of a much more extensive and expansive family, and that they want us to embrace them because we're all kindred.
We're all a consciousness. Each one of us has our individual consciousness, and that part of us. I want to open it up. I want us. This hell that we are actually living in right now is so obnoxious to me. It's so incredibly limiting to what our possibilities are. DC and I have so much fun, you know, imagining things, talking about stuff out.
I bet.
Talking our stuff out, you know, and, you know, we never knew each other until we came here. And, you know, he's my brother from another mother. I love him dearly. And we just, you know, this journey, I you know, to be walking it with my my good friend and brother, Mr. Deadcat there, is absolutely incredible.
Well, Thumper in DC, Bill Tompkins told me, he said, Frank, there's other planets that are more beautiful than Earth that have no wars. They don't have typhoons or hurricanes, adverse weather. He said the temperature is stable all the time. They're incredible. And the people are so loving and giving of themselves and wanting to join with us and share their knowledge and what they've learned. And he said, we're the one that's different.
I'll trade the wars, the egos, the
nonsense, all that nonsense.
Yeah, it's absolute nonsense. It absolutely is.
It's all nonsense.
That's a perfect word for it.
Yep, it's all nonsense.
You know,
and it's all diversionary. It's all diversionary to keep you from knowing what's really going on. But, you know, we're seeing the last dance of the tyrants, and I'm happy to witness this, and I'm happy to be able to share with your audience. And if you'll be so kind as to let me share my email address, if anybody has any questions or would like me to expand into more detail some of this information, I'll be happy to share it with them.
Oh, please do. Yes.
Sure. It's Frank. It's my name. It's Frank Chille, CHILLE @hotmail.com. And again, I would recommend any of your audience members to subscribe to Filer's Files. It's FILERS, Filer's Files. And it's a free subscription. It comes out every Wednesday. And it's just astounding information. It's information you're not going to get anywhere else.
And we've been placing that out in YouTube chat as a link for people to get to.
Yep.
So,
and I'll also give you Dr. Sarfati's website. It's incredible. You'll get cutting edge physics on there and other information that's going on behind the scenes. And it's called stardrive.org.
By the way, Frank, when all of this comes out, will I understand algebra?
Probably. Probably.
Yeah, you'll probably understand why it's actually pretty useless, just like it was back in school.
Actually, I see myself probably leaning more towards geometry. Physics, there you go.
Well, it's pretty amazing when you get into certain lines of work. You take all these classes in high school, and then you 30 years later, you find out that you needed everything that you learned there. You know, that was what I experienced when I got into some of the more advanced machining techniques that were required for gear manufacturing, and I realized that all of that. Differential equations and trigonometry and some of the more advanced levels of mathematics were absolutely necessary to understand what I was doing there. So,
yes. Can I offer you and your audience a quick comment about crop circles?
Yes.
I've been told that physicists are getting advanced physics concepts from some of the symbology that's in these crop circles. It's pretty profound. It's pretty profound.
Mm-hmm.
I actually saw a reference to that out in YouTube here just a couple of days ago, and it came quickly and it was gone, and then the subject changed really fast, so I wasn't able to follow up with the person.
They're paying very close attention to it because it's teaching them things that they were not aware of. So, the seeding is going on, the nudging of consciousness is going on, and all we have to do is be open and receptive and willing to say, what I knew before was wrong. Now I have the clarity of seeing what's right.
Just saying, I'm ready to learn.
Yeah.
Well, and I've got one more for you. I see we're getting down to about 10 minutes left on our show.
Yeah. Any other good questions out there?
Let's
live chat. Come on, kick it up there a notch. They're asking about what about teletransportation?
Teleportation.
Teleportation. Well, I was going to mention to you folks the new Blue Book series that started last year.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the subjects that they covered were teleportation and using portals. And this was stuff that they were finding out in the 50s. They're introducing the public to those concepts now. They're releasing that information now.
Mm-hmm. Another question out here, types of aliens.
As diverse as you can imagine. The diversification of life, there's a lot of them that look like us, and there's a lot of them that don't look like us. And just because they don't look like us doesn't mean that they're necessarily not benevolent.
And there are some very malevolent ones.
Yeah, that have their own agenda,
Yeah.
and a lot of that, as I mentioned to you before, is being curtailed, and they know that the dance is over. They know
Mm-hmm.
that. To me, in my mind's eye, I already see us at the goalpost, and we've succeeded. We're there.
Is now that's the cessation of the negative influence on our planet, but it's not necessarily the cessation of the negative influence that is still in pockets throughout the universe.
Oh yeah, there's always going to be those that want to serve self. There will always be that. You know, that's one of the tests. That's one of the tests to rise above that.
I'm ready, buddy. I'm ready.
Yep.
Yes.
I want to thank you for this opportunity of being able to share so openly with you folks and with your audience, and for their questions. It was really just truly delightful, and there's so much more that's going to be released regarding Bill's work. There's still so much more. He planned originally a 6-volume series of Selected by Extraterrestrials, and I will leave you with this. When he told me about his mother, and he said, my mother was really extraordinary and she didn't look like any of her sisters. I said to Bill, could it be that your mom was a Nordic? And he said, my mother was a Nordic.
Fascinating.
Yeah, his mother was a Nordic.
I got to tell you, Frank, this has been a tremendous 3 hours. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
It's been an honor, really an honor. It goes by fast, doesn't it?
It incredibly fast.
3 hours.
And I got to tell you, we have set attendance records on our show tonight. We just, in the last few minutes, dropped below 1,400 viewers that YouTube is showing us. Obviously, that's what they're showing us.
Yes.
But to have 1,400 viewers join us through these late hours of the night, and again,
Yes,
thank you for
truly.
staying up with us tonight. I know both DSC and I would let's keep the communication open. You're welcome.
Absolutely. There's so much more to share. There's so much more to share, and I will be happy to coordinate George Filer with DC and coming on board and sharing stories about his incredible life.
Excellent.
Love it.
And
Love it.
any of the other folks that you have an association with, and we would love to have any one of them on that would like to come on and talk about this stuff, and get people to use to this idea. And I got to say, just thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Incredible.
You know, there's no strangers with awareness. With awareness, everybody is known and everybody is our friends.
You know,
Friends are better than enemies.
Oh,
And that's what I tell my ex-wife.
yeah.
That's good. That's
Good
good.
luck with that. But one of the things I think that has really opened people up to the whole idea of this disclosure, at least as far as the people that attend with our PSB Patriot Soapbox channel, is
Yes.
the fact we are all volunteers here. Nobody
Yes.
looks for a paycheck. Nobody looks for we're here because we want to be here and because we're on a mission to make things right with the world and make things right with our country. And so, we're kind of automatically, because of that way of thinking, we're kind of automatically open to the entire idea of where we go one, we go all. And that's exactly what you're speaking of here with the cosmic disclosure and the Great Awakening.
Yes, because we're all part of the same cosmic family, and they want us to be not strangers any longer.
And and I think that so much of this ties into what President Trump and the Q team and the white hats that are taking down this vile, evil entities, or whatever you want to call them, and so it all ties together. It's such an incredibly immense project, though.
And Thumper, we all have to take the swords out of our hearts. We all have to do that.
Yeah.
The swords has to come out of our hands and our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Thank you again for a fine evening of sharing, and I look forward to coordinating this with George Filer, and I'm telling you, your audience is going to love George's stories. Just phenomenal stuff.
And we want you back anytime you want.
Yes, yes.
You're now a member of our family.
Thank you so very much.
Right there.
You're very, very kind. There's so much more to share. And, each day is exciting. It's like each dawn, I run to each dawn because in anticipation of what's yet to be revealed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got to tell you, though,
Bring it.
after the third time on the show, you'll get your T-shirt.
Yes. That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, and continue doing good work, and continue being brilliant.
Well, thank you so much. Gosh, what an evening! What an evening!
Yes.
Yep, it's been very special.
Thank you so much, Frank, for being here.
Yep, and thank you for inviting me, DC. And it's been a joy, and I'll continue to share information. I'm telling you, so much is becoming aware on. Sometimes it seems like almost an hourly basis.
The pace is picking up.
Yeah,
No question.
Yeah. More to come. Stay tuned. Take care,
right.
Frank.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Try to get some sleep.
Yeah, really. Oh, DC, high five, man. Boom.
High five, brother.
All right. Woo.
Great show. Great. I love this guy. He is absolutely part of the family.
That was absolutely fantastic. Live chat, what'd you say? Was it worth staying up tonight and listening to Frank? I got to tell you, it was absolutely worth every minute. What an amazing show.
And if you guys noticed, I got out the links to the Hunt for Zero Point, that book. It's actually a PDF. You can read it. You don't have to buy the book. You can just read the PDF, and it is online. I put it out there in link form. I'll go ahead and throw it out there a couple more times so that you can get it. And that is the Inside the Classified World of Anti-Gravity Technology by Nick Cook. And I'll get this out there to you in form so you guys can find the website and read it.
And I got to tell you guys, live chat, I want you to give a big, huge thank you, and if he could hear it, a big round of applause for DC. DC reached out to Frank after we had that video and everything, and he's been working to get coordinate with Frank to have Frank on the show tonight. And I got to tell you, brother, well done, well done, awesome.
It has purely been my pleasure to do this. This is and my honor. Just meeting the guy and talking with him and discovering just how much we all in this endeavor have in common. It's incredible to me. And it's just, thank you for that. But really, this really is an indication of where we go one, we go all.
Absolutely.
This is a labor of love for every one of us. And I'm in this to see the end of it be that great awakening that we're all praying for, hoping for, and working toward.
Absolutely. All right, guys, it is now 2:00. I know that Percival and LearnShare are standing in the wings, ready to pick up the pace. So DC, you want to say goodnight, and I'll say goodnight, and we'll turn it over to those guys.
Absolutely. God bless you all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for spending this time with us. And I'd say give a big round of applause wherever you are for Frank CHILLE. What a guy. And just speaking off the top of his head, he's able to fill 3 hours in a blink. So God bless the man. God bless President Trump. God bless Q. Thank you for the Q drops. Amazing, good stuff. Stuff to cover on our show in the morning.
Absolutely. In a couple of hours, yeah.
God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world. Make the earth great again.
Absolutely.
Amen.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us tonight on Hyperdrive, Patriot Soapbox 24/7. You guys are just amazing. I am totally in awe and humbled by so many people sticking around and listening to Frank and his stories and everything about disclosure. It's coming in more ways than one. Are you ready? I go to bed tonight with a joyful heart. Good night, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you in a couple of hours.
You gentlemen have a good night. Good evening.
Yeah, rest well.
Get a couple at least.
Yeah.